watching this. Yeah, have a comment, tell me where you are, and tell me what you're drinking, or if you can even just hear me, that would be great. Just testing the live stream. Off my microphone, that's why. Okay, so I've been muted. Thanks, Melinda, for the logistical feedback. Okay, so I hope everybody can hear me now. Okay, Anthony, you must be very stressed with your auction going on at the moment. I hope you're doing okay. David, welcome from DC. Nice to have you here. Kevin, I was going to drink from that bottle straight. This bottle of Crested. I should have gone straight for it. Would have been easier than pouring it into the glass. We've got loads joining us here now. Okay, so thanks for the feedback. You couldn't hear me, only the music, because I was the idiot who had the microphone turned off. I'm back. Yeah, Connor, welcome. Great to see you. Kevin, you can hear me now, I think, hopefully. And Tonus, thanks for the feedback. You can hear me now as well. Brilliant. My voice stopped. It did, Lulu, as I stupidly pressed mute on my microphone, but hopefully you can hear me now all right. Here's Daniel joining us from Cork. Great stuff. The music was far more relaxing than my voice. Thanks. There's Dave O'Connell, welcome. Brian McCarthy with your Bushmill 16, you're very welcome. Chris Hennessy, all the way from Kilkenny, a man who has donated some of the whiskies for tonight, including this fantastic Jameson from the 1950s and Powers 15-year-old black label pot still whiskey. There's Mona. How are you, Mona? All the way from Grandview. And Connor in Dublin, currently having a green spot. That's fantastic. Great to have you all here on St. Patrick's Day, a day that has changed, well, a very different day than last year or any other year that I can certainly remember. The fact that all the pubs in Cork are closed, or in Cork, the pubs all over Ireland are closed, and the pubs all over a lot of the world are closed as well, which is a sad time, but an important time for us to remember to stay safe and not to be spreading this virus. But if we can come together like this with a few glasses of whiskey every now and again, at least we won't stay too isolated. We'll have a few drinks together and talk about a little bit of whiskey, a little bit of Ireland, and see how you're all getting on. Dante in Westerville, you've got your Jameson cold brew, which is great. Hi Joe, fair play to you for joining. Thanks Joe for Joe Moore, Dublin. And Eric, good evening to you. You're very welcome in. These comments are coming in thick and fast. All right, so we're up to 55 people now. We first time ever doing a live stream. And the reason I did this was because we're all isolated. We're all locked away in our own homes or wherever we may be. We're probably away from our friends and our extended family. And so while we're isolated, I thought that we could at least connect virtually. And what better way to do that than online? So what are we going to do today? Well, it's coming up close to 4 o'clock Californian time, 7 o'clock Eastern time, and 11 o'clock in Ireland. I'm just going to sit here for the next few hours and have a few drinks and talk to you and answer questions and tell you stories about the whiskey and just have a bit of crack, have a bit of chat, get to know you all a bit better. Peter Duggan, good buddy there, joining us from Portland. Sláinte, Peter, welcome. There's Aidan McGovern from Cork. Buddy Aidan, welcome. Stephen from County Down, you're having a paddy on Paddy's Day. Good man. I've got a paddy that I'll be adding to the repertoire in a little bit as well. So paddy is a good thing to be making an appearance on Paddy's Day, all right. Logan, hi Logan, how are you doing? All the way from Dublin, Ohio. Logan's got his Method and Madness single malt. Fair play to you. Who else have we got here now? We've got Jason Bourbon from Germany. Jason, big whiskey YouTuber. Jason, you're welcome. Jeff and Dee from Indy, killing their bottle of Teeling 24. That's what I like to hear. Fair play to you both. You're both very welcome. Let me move this screen over here. Mel, can I get your help to move this? I'll put that beside the screen there so I can see the comments coming in thick and fast. All right, let me move this over here. All right. So, let me see who we've got here. Eric. Yeah, that's perfect. Thank you. Eric, you're going to be dipping into the Barry Crockett legacy while I share some stories. No better bottle to be dipping into. What an incredible drop of whiskey that is. So Jeff and Nancy from Buffalo in New York, you're very welcome. That's damn good. Omar, you big bluffer, he calls me. I am a big bluffer. Sure, why wouldn't I be? A few glasses of whiskey and an old video camera and away we go. Happy days. It's great that we can connect people from Cork, from Ballybunion, of all places, from Indianapolis, from Dublin, Ohio. Colin McDermott here, good man there. Colin from Ashford Castle. He's got his Redbreast 12-year-old cask strength. Fair play to you. So, from Mayo, greetings from Mayo. Shane Moore is in. Good man, Shane, with your Redbreast 15. That's your favourite. That's your all-time favourite. Daniel wants to know what an Omar is. Anyone who doesn't know Omar should go visit thatstramgood.com and give him a follow. He's some chancer. He'll sneak in on anybody's limelight. Anybody who turns on a camera, Omar will jump in behind it. So go over there and give him a follow, or he'll be very disappointed. Lulu, you can't find the Barry Crockett in Ohio, unfortunately. It's available in Ohio, it's just harder to find. So I recommend you go to ohlq.com, which is the Ohio Liquor Control Board website, and you can find all of the available whiskies in Ohio there. Hopefully you'll find some Barry Crockett legacy, but it is harder to find. John Fleming, all the way from Carry Out, off licence in Killarney. Fair play to you for joining. You've just finished work. Must be late for you. Brian from Cincinnati. Good buddy Brian. Welcome. Just got in. You're on a Cooper's Crows and your last pour. Great. Kill that bottle there now, Brian, and send us pictures of a killed bottle of Cooper's Crows. Ger Buckley, the Cooper in Middleton, will be very proud of you. Alan Bolster. You're very welcome. From Waterford, drinking a Roe & Co. and a Green Spot. Fair play to you. Lovely blend there and a nice pot still. I don't have any Green Spot or Roe & Co. tonight, but I've got a few others. Anthony Sheehy wondering what an Omar is. It's a great question. We're all wondering what an Omar is, but if you go to thatstrandgood.com, you might get some answers there. So I want to know what you're opening. I want to know what whiskies you're drinking. Ian Hayes, good man, Ian Hayes. You're drinking Redbreast Listowel tonight. Ian is a great collector and a great fan of the Middleton brands. He was good enough to connect me with a Dungourney 1964 a few months ago. So I'm glad to see you're joining here, Ian. And we're up to 80 people now on the live feed, which is incredible. So what are we going to do this afternoon? Well, we are going to, let me make sure I can see everything here. So as long as you can hear me all okay, I think you can. I'm going to go through some whiskies. I'm going to share some whiskies. So for example, the first one I have here is Jameson Crested, and that's what I'm drinking right now. And then over the course of the evening, I'll go through the rest of them here. So I've got Paddy's Paddy Pot Still, Centenary Paddy Edition. I've got, in no particular order, these will come and go, I've got Redbreast 27-year-old. It's like musical chairs here. I've got, this is a single malt from W.D. O'Connell, a 17-year-old single malt, PX Pedro Jimenez cask finish. Let me see what else we have. I have a very special Jameson here from the 1950s, from the original Bow Street Distillery in Dublin. This was given to me as a bottle share by Chris Hennessy, who from Kilkenny, a good buddy of mine in Kilkenny, and David Chick from Washington, D.C. I know you're watching. You'll be interested in this one. This is a really special pour. I've got a Powers 15-year-old black label. That wasn't ever for sale in Ireland, I don't believe. I think that was just exclusively for the Italian market. But another bottle share that I got from Chris. We're going to drink that. And I've also got a bottle of Napogue Castle 12-year-old, Chateau Pichon Baron, French oak aged. That's from Omar. Omar shared that with me, so thanks very much. Let me dive in here to some of the comments. Suzanne, Clonakilty, West Cork, brilliant. Drinking Roe & Co, single grain. This is amazing that we've got so many people here now, 76 people. Martin McShane, you're drinking JJ Corrie, the Banner, and the Gale, fantastic. Maureen Linehan, one last sip of a 1997 Middleton Very Rare. What an incredible bottle that is. So I've got all these great sound effects here apparently that I can play. So when I hear amazing bottles like a 1997 Middleton Very Rare, I can play something like this. Right, isn't that brilliant? Connor Ryan dusting off a 1970s Powers. That also deserves a bit of applause. There we go. Robert Scott Robinson, great to see you here. I saw you last week at one of our tastings in Ohio. You're starting with a red spot. You're starting off big. It's only downhill from there, I'd say. Quiveen, wondering if we really have to drink the Jameson 15. It's meant to be muck. Well, this isn't Jameson 15, actually. This is actually Jameson and Son, a 7-year-old pot still from 1954. Malted barley, oats, and wheat in that pot still mix there. The black label 15-year-old was Daniel Pennington, Chris is telling me. So, Daniel, you gave me that, did you? Was that as a trick, like a special trick to teach me a lesson? Apparently this is a strange one that we'll be opening, but sure, we'll see how we go. Brian Hughes, welcome from sunny San Diego. You're pouring a John's Lane, Powers John's Lane, brilliant. And Joe Moore, you had a few John's Lanes earlier too, and now you're on your second green spot, Chateau Leoville Barton. I love that drop. Michael Farrelly, you're having a Barry Crockett legacy, brilliant. So you're all joining in with Powers 15, you meant Quiveen, was it? Yeah, I don't know if we have to. I suppose we have because it's here, we have to drink it. So the first one I'm drinking, first of all, I'm using a Tua glass, and this is Ireland's whiskey glass. For those of you joining in the US who've not seen this before, this is a uniquely Irish product. It is called the Tua, Tuath, and it is perfect for sipping Irish whiskey. It's got a unique base to it that you can see there, and you can actually lie it on its side if you've got not quite as big a pour as I have in there. You can lie it on its side, but it means you get to hold the stem like that, so you're not warming the drink with your hands like the Glencairn. It's got a lovely big wide brim on the nose too. So my first pour of the night is something that is not available in the United States, but a lot of people bring it back from Ireland, and that's Crested, Jameson Crested, formerly known as Crested 10, which I think will be familiar to a lot of the Irish who are joining here. And Jameson Crested was the first bottling by Jameson in their distillery, so prior to the early 1960s. I think 1963 was when they first bottled Jameson Crested. Prior to that, all the whiskies coming out of Bow Street would have been sold in barrels, and this was their first bottling, and it has been bottled since the 1960s, and is a very popular, very affordable blended whiskey in Ireland, and a little bit, I think, more complex and a little bit, for me, a little bit nicer on the palate than Jameson original. It's got more of a pot still component, aged for a little bit longer, and yet still, for some reason, sells for less than Jameson in Ireland. Anyway, last time I saw it. Hard to get in America, but you can get it in Canada. All right, I don't know if anybody's ever had Crested, but lovely pot still nose on it. I'm being told not to drink the 15-year-old, whatever I do. The 15-year-old powers. This must be terrible stuff altogether that you've given me, Daniel, that everyone's telling me not to drink it. That might have to be the next one. John Fleming and Clarny mentioning that, there's lots of, this coronavirus is going to cause all kinds of havoc and chaos to the whiskey industry in Ireland, no doubt about it. We're going to have to do our best to support the industry, whatever we can do. We've got some independent brands that we're sharing here tonight, like this one from W.D. O'Connell. This is a sample bottle, there's no label on it. W.D. O'Connell Whiskey Merchants, and Dahi O'Connell is doing a great job of launching a new whiskey merchant brand. And so we're going to support these new independent distillers and bottlers and merchants and bonders over the next few weeks and months through Stories and Sips. I've been sharing some episodes that have really kind of shone a light on those that are doing new and incredible things, like Patrick Sheehy from the Kirk Single Malt Irish Whiskey, which launched last week. So we're going to do lots of different things to showcase those distilleries that are going to need our support, and those brands and whiskey merchants that are going to need our support in this tough time. Jim Murphy, who has messaged me just now from Ireland, has said that most of the group he's with, and as far as I know, Jim, there's about 160 of you in Ireland for some reason. You're on some kind of magnificent jaunt through the countryside, that most of you are buying Crested to bring home. Yeah, very smart move. Super affordable and a lovely sipping whiskey. Always have a bottle of Crested in the house. So Joe Moore, who works in Dublin Airport and has his finger on the pulse, says that Crested is the biggest seller with Americans travelling home through Dublin Airport. And in with the old the sales pitch, if anyone's interested, it's only €24 duty-free. That's incredible value. I don't know of a better value whiskey than that. Crested for €24 in Dublin Airport. That's incredible. Omar, That's Damn Good, says that you have to try the worst to appreciate the best. And I know he's referring to this Powers 15-year-old, not the Crested 10, not the Crested at all. Stacey, you're welcome to join. And Robert Scott, the two of you were at my tasting during the week. Stacey, you're playing darts and whiskey. Not a terrible St. Patrick's Day at all. Michael O'Comon, again, raining on my parade with his Powers 15-year-old black label. This makes me want to drink it more and more, lads, the more you tell me it's terrible. But anyway, back to the Crested. If you can get your hands on some Crested, it's a lovely, lovely drop. Brian Redden just stepped away and came back. He said he had to peel potatoes for shepherd's pie. This is becoming the most stereotypical Irish thread of all time. Martin saying it's the Jameson 15 that's rotten, not the Powers 15. So Jameson 15, I have a bottle of it that's not here today, but Jameson 15 was an old bottling from the Bow Street distillery that apparently it's full of sulphur notes. They lit the sulphur on fire to dry out the barrels, and apparently it caused awful damage to the nose and the flavour of it. And so anytime somebody opens a bottle, they'll have one sip of it and they'll throw the whole thing away. So I haven't opened my bottle yet. I just bought it because it came from the Bow Street distillery, and I thought you want a little bit of history. But I might not be drinking it. Robert, thanks for that. Yeah, it was a great tasting we did last week. George from Utah, opening a bottle of Aharu, Anacuna. I can't believe you can get that in Utah. I haven't seen that anywhere in the United States, which is amazing. And Alan, you're drinking a random little bottle of rye, storm tossed rye from Fremont Mischief in Seattle. No, not very patriotic at all. Where's your Irish whiskey? Thomas, also from works at Dublin Airport, the Loop. Great man for the whiskey and great knowledge on whiskey. Sharing that you're having a Teeling Brabazon 2 at the moment. Fair play to you. And Connor just opened his bottle of Crested. So much better than he expected for the price. It really is a really special whiskey. Even the colour of it, there's a lovely dark colour to this that is unbelievable for €24. And Connor, I think you hit it right in the head. Lovely chocolatey taste to it. So yeah, Crested is a lovely drop of whiskey. Sipping away on this now for a while. So yeah, we're in different times. Melinda's over here now looking at some of the comments and sharing. Oh, she's drinking a Powers. Fair play to you. So my wife is on the other side of the camera now, and she's trying to stay out of focus, out of view. But she's opened up. Show me what you've opened up. What's that? Look at that. Look, I've turned the American girl Irish. She's drinking a drop of Powers, a baby Powers. Fair play to you. Antonis, what's the best snack to have while drinking whiskey? Good question. The best snack to have while drinking whiskey is another whiskey, and that way you'll always be satiated. I don't know. I see a lot of people having crackers. I've served chocolate with whiskey. Anything that's not going to overpower the whiskey flavour, something plain or something complementary. I try and avoid anything that's too complex if I'm having a whiskey, so that I let the flavours come out. But maybe somebody else would recommend what's the best snack to have while drinking whiskey and share their thoughts. Oh, and you were on the Powers John's Lane and 3 Swallow. Great stuff altogether. Love the Powers brand. Love the Powers whiskies. Sad that there's only 3 of them in the lineup at the moment, but hoping that's going to change over the coming weeks and months and years. 85 of us here now, which is brilliant. This is the biggest tasting I've ever been part of. Hopefully you've all got a whiskey in your hands. I'm loving this Crested. So Aidan says, speaking of Powers, he's currently sipping on a drop bottled in 1973. All right, that deserves one of these. Good job, Aidan. Joe Moore, who works in Dublin Airport with Thomas, says he's never seen Thomas do any work. I've never seen either of you do any work. You've always only been pouring whiskies or drinking whiskies, the two of you. Shane Moore, you've hit the nail on the head there, all right. And Melinda's obviously the brains of the operation. She's the one plugging in all the cables and setting everything up, and then sitting back and sipping on the Powers. She's no fool. Yeah, Suzanne, if you do get to try the tested, or get to try the Crested again when the pub's open, go for it. So Joe and Thomas now are infighting in our thread about who does more work at Dublin Airport. I'd say neither of them. So that's damn good. He's got some good suggestions here on pairing. So for pairing, chocolate, dark chocolate, taste, take some chocolate and taste again. All right, so that's damn good. Feels like a barrel of chocolate with a barrel of whiskey is your best bet. So it's St. Patrick's Day. It's 15:15 the hour, wherever you are, 4:15 on the west coast of America, 7:15 on the east coast of America, and 11:15 in Ireland. Want to raise a toast to all of you for coming out coming out of your seats or staying in your seats, but pressing play on the video anyway and joining. A toast to you all for joining, for removing isolation, reducing isolation, coming together, celebrating St. Patrick's Day and supporting Irish whiskey distillers and makers and bonders like you've been doing so well for so long. Hopefully some of you on this stream now tonight will find new whiskies that you've not tried before, and you'll find new independent whiskey companies that you can support. But what I want to do with this, and maybe with more of them, is just to bring us together, to chat, because I think we're entering into an isolating few weeks and months ahead where we don't know what the future's going to hold. So the more we can find ways to come together, I'll do these all day long. I have enough whiskey to keep me going for months here. So as long as there's whiskey here, and if somebody wants to send it, I'll happily take it. We'll keep doing these streams. So this is the first of what will be many, hopefully. So let me see what questions we have here. What's the difference between the older Crested and the new one we're drinking? Okay, so good question, Kevin. So there's a few differences. So it was called Crested 10 in the past. The story goes that was because it came from warehouse number 10, not because it was 10 years old. I can stand corrected on that. It was certainly a different a different blend historically, and I think it's changed slightly over the past few years. My understanding is that this Crested is slightly different than the Crested 10 labelled in the green bottle that we know, but Joe Moore might know a little bit more about that, and That's Dram Good might be able to give me a little bit more feedback on that. Anthony says, any more than 100 people and we'll have to move outside. That's right, Anthony. We will. Yeah, we can't all be in the same virtual room together. Molly's finishing off her Napa Oak 12-year-old. Great stuff, Molly. I've got a Napa Oak 12-year-old here tonight somewhere. That came from Omar, but it's a Chateau Pichon. It's a travel retail wine finish, which I'm looking forward to trying. Joe Moore recommends Powers Gold label with oysters. Some man, Joe Moore. You're living a good life over there in Dublin. Peter Duggan, good buddy Peter Duggan, who I haven't seen in probably a year now. He was up there in Portland, Maine. He's stepping up to Middleton Barry Crockett legacy. All right, that deserves one of these. That deserves one of these. Good man, Peter. In a glass that Linda Murphy gave you at Katie's Pub in Cove on April 1st, 1999. A story I've heard many times. That's a great old story. Peter, I got to know through my work, and when he heard that I was from Ireland, said that he had had the best time of his life once in a county called Cork. And I said, well, I'm from Cork. And he said, well, I was in a town called Cove. And I said, well, I'm from Cove. And he said, well, I was in a pub called Katie's Pub in Cove. And I said, well, that was my local. And we started chatting, and we've been friends ever since. Amazing how whiskey and Ireland and the old sod like connects people and makes kind of lifelong friends. A lot of people on here now, Anthony, Omar, Brian in Cincinnati, so many of you that I've met in person as a result of chatting about whiskey, which is incredible. There's barely a bad soul amongst the industry, which is incredible. Sláinte, Brian Riley. Brian from Columbus, great to see you here. Sorry you couldn't make one of the recent tastings, but we'll see you again soon. Caitlin in Cincinnati, woo! I'll give you an applause. Caitlin's drinking Clonakilty from a good friend. I wonder who that came from. Great stuff. Glad to see you got the Clonakilty and you're enjoying it. Shane Moore has a question for the group, wondering if anyone has intel on a future Jameson pot still release. We have no crystal balls here. Anybody got any thoughts on that? Alright, so I'm going to move on from the Crested now in a minute. 20 minutes in. By the end of this, lads, you'll be picking up off the floor if I go through all these whiskies. Tim from Dublin, not from Dublin, Tim from New York is joining us. Brilliant. How are you, Tim? Tim was, I met Tim through Whisky, Tim McKee, Whisky Wednesdays on Instagram. If you don't know Tim, go and follow Tim. I did a video about Napa Oak about a year ago, and in the video I said that I was talking about the Napa Oak 1951, which is a 36-year-old whiskey that was released in 1987. And I mentioned in the video how there'd be no chance I'd ever get to try it. And I'd say within an hour of publishing the video, Tim messaged me and he said, you will try it next time you're in New York. And true to his word, next time I was in New York, I met up with Tim and we had a great old night. He opened some incredible Irish whiskies I'd never seen the likes of. And he lined them up. I think we went through 10 whiskies that night and we danced out the door afterwards. But he opened up a bottle of Napa Oak 1951. And that's the whiskey community here. It brings people together and they share. There's nobody asking for something in return. It's just you want somebody to try something very special. So Tim, I'm delighted to hear that you're joining us, and I'm glad to have made your acquaintance and your friendship through all of this. James Kearns, James in Letterkenny, or are you in Donegal? God knows where you are at the moment. You're eating Green and Black's 85% cocoa chocolate with your Redbreast 21. Now that's a good night in. Superb. Suzanne says you always have your best times in Cork. You do indeed. So chocolate is coming up again and again as being a good recommendation. Melinda's roaring laughing at the comments. What are we hearing over there? Whose comment?
JP.
JP, where's JP? Let me see his comment. Where's the turtleneck, Barry? JP, we can ban you from this. We can block you from this as well. JP, you're a gas man. Tim corrected me on the 10 whiskies that we had in New York. He said we actually had 17 whiskies, and then we went to the pub. You're right. I don't know how we were still standing, but we had a great all night. Aidan Kennedy is sipping Glendalough Burgundy cask finish in Paris. Look at where we're coming from for this get together online. It's unbelievable. Paris, Killarney, Cork, San Diego, Columbus, Kilkenny, amazing. Letterkenny, Cleveland, Lulu. Blue Spot sounds good. We don't know if Blue Spot's ever going to come out. We hear rumours if it'll ever make up the complete set of Spot whiskies that we were promised to get back. Who knows? They might drop it on us. I'd be the last one to hear about it anyway. Well, JP, the turtleneck had to go away because the sun is shining. So I'll bring it back for you though next time I'm in Cork. Brian wants to know how I'd rate the Napa Oak 1951. It's on the bucket list. So this is a great question. So I had huge hopes for the Napa Oak 1951. And on the night that we tasted it, I think Tim will agree, we tasted it alongside some incredible pours. And funnily enough, we tasted it alongside Napa Oak 21-year-old, which comes from Bushmills, to the best of my knowledge. And we tasted the two of those together, and we both agreed that the 21-year-old was better than the 1951. But I have to think that when I'm tasting Napa Oak 1951, I'm not tasting it for flavour alone. I'm tasting it for history. I'm tasting it for the story of this American man who came over and bought a castle and filled the cellars with whiskey from the old B. Daly, the old Tullamore distillery, filled it with barrels that he got from a shuttered distillery. That's really what we were sipping on, was history. And history doesn't always taste great, but it was a good whiskey, but it wasn't incredible. So, lesson learned. And I've tasted some old whiskies, and I know that Omar's got some thoughts on things like the Dungourney 1964, which he thought was a bit of a disappointment to him. When you're tasting these, it's going to be a bit of a crapshoot, isn't it? You have to value it for more than just the flavour alone. If you want the freshest, most complex flavour, it might not be something that was distilled 60 or 70 years ago. That might have mellowed too much by now. But yeah, Tim is right. We like the 21-year-old better. Brian wants to know where the green is, why I'm not wearing green. Brian, from Cincinnati, and many Americans often wonder why I don't wear green on St. Patrick's Day. And the Irish who are here in the stream will agree with me. We don't wear green in Ireland. We don't have to wear green. We are green. You cut us, we bleed green inside. But look at this lovely video I've created with a green hat in the corner. My name is on a green background. I tried to do a little bit of playing it up for you Americans there now, Brian, down in Cincinnati. But we don't go to town as much as the Americans do. We don't have the same enthusiasm, let's say, as you do for St. Patrick's Day, but we still celebrate, and we admire the interest. Joe says that this online group tasting could definitely catch on. It could. It's time for me to move on to the next whiskey anyway. Let's finish this one. All right, let's vote on the next one. Do you want it to be Redbreast 27, Napa Oak 12-year-old, O'Connell's 12-year-olds or 17-year-old single malt, Powers 15-year-old, Jameson from the 1950s, or Paddy? What do you want me to try next? And while you're thinking about that, Molly says that the traditional colour for St. Patrick's Day was blue. You're right, it was. Drop of water in here, flesh this out. Alright, so we are now up to 88 people. We might crack 100 yet on the tasting, which would be incredible. Straight to the Redbreast 27, everyone is saying. Powers 15, Daniel wants to poison me, apparently. Daniel, I'm pretty sure that I did a good trade. I gave you something great from America when I came over, and I think they might have given you a Redbreast hat, if I recall correctly. And if Powers 15-year-old Black labels my thanks, this poison, I'll find you next time I come back to Cork. Okay, so 27. Everyone says I should try 27. O'Connell's, go big. Redbreast 27. Drink the Powers 15 and get it out of the way. All right, okay, here's what we're going to do. Cuivino Murraku, Kevin Murphy, buddy in Ireland, he says that he's also got a Powers 15-year-old in Ireland, and he's going to open it to share the pain. St. Patrick's Day is not supposed to be about pain at all. Everyone wants me to go for the Redbreast 27. What else have we got here? Jameson from the 50s. All right, we'll get to that. All right, we're going to do it. We're going to go with the Powers. Quivine, you go get yourself the Powers and come back to me. And as soon as you have the Powers 15-year-old, we'll open it. There's Peter Duggan waving to you there, Melinda. Did you see it? Ian Hayes wants me to open the 27. So here's what I'm going to do. 27 comes after the Powers. We'll start with what everyone's telling me is the worst one we've got, and what many of you are telling me is the best one I've got. Go for the 27. 27, 27, 27. Okay, Jack Jim O'Brien enjoying the Toman Gate single pot still. That's great. I know we've got Nick Ryan's on the line as well, which is brilliant. So Nick, you've got a fan there. I know we've got many fans in Ireland. I interviewed Nick for a recent episode of Stories and Sips where we talked about his new venture, Toman Gate Whisky, which we're looking forward to seeing more of. While we're thinking about this Powers 15-year-old, that Stram Good has a good point here about the Dungorney 64 and the Napa Oak 51. He says, we live in an age of tremendously well-created whisky distillation that's better than ever before, and maturation led by science, no duff notes from sulphur, etc. But when you look at what we have today, it's a taste disappointment. History-wise, they're both eminence and part of what shaped Irish whisky. I couldn't agree more. Distilling and maturation have moved on in buckets, and but I will never not splurge on something old if I can get my hands on a sample of it, just to know what it tasted like when people in the 50s and 60s were sitting around the bar sampling or just having a good old night out. What did that taste like? Because what a time capsule these old whiskies give us. Okay, so we've got two more joining in with the Powers 15. Michael Farrelly's going to get his. Daniel Pennington's going to get his. So now we're going to have 4 of us drinking Powers 15 together. All right. Now your palates and noses are probably far more advanced than mine are. I'm just an old chancer here drinking a bit of whiskey and putting it on a video. But, okay, it's going to be the Powers 15-year-old is going to be the next one up. Okay. Jeez, knock that over. Okay, so this Powers 15-year-old black label. You've heard of Powers Gold Label. Mel, can I have your bottle there so I can show? This is the Powers Gold Label. That's the baby Power. So we're all familiar with that gold label. And then this is a sample of black label. Obviously, it's not the bottle, but it was a rounded bottle, kind of a stubby little bottle for the Italian market, released in would have been the late 60s, early 70s, I believe. And it was purely for export only, as far as I know, just for the Italian market. And somehow this poison has managed to survive. And we have 4 of us here tonight that are all going to drink it. Okay, so I'm pouring my Powers 15-year-old in here. Queeveen and the lads, Daniel, Michael. I hope you have ears as well. I don't know what I'm getting myself into here. So let me see what we're tasting. So this is from late 1960s, early 1970s. Woo! That is this is like a donkey kicked you in the head when you weren't looking. The punch from that, the nose is very pungent. It's almost like bad new make spirit. The question is, are our insurance policies signed? Mel, are they signed? You get all the whiskey if I drop dead after this. Notes of bog water and sewage. It's incredibly pungent. The sulphur from the inside of the cask can use to dry out the barrels by lighting the sulphur on fire. Oh. So Nick, who's an incredible whiskey educator, Nick Ryan, behind Toman Gate Whisky, who runs his own spirits training company as well. He's got some good notes here. More direct heat back then, so more reaction from the older stuff. If they have a worm tub, you should have a lot more sulphur as less copper interaction. So it should be lit, big texture in the older stuff. Nose, soul of a farmer's chew. Right, let's sip it. It doesn't taste half as bad as it smells. You know what there's notes of in this now, and the flavour is, it's not too dissimilar from some of the notes I got from the first time I ever sipped Dungorney 1964. And it's a bit like walking into an old leather store. But Anthony from irishwhiskeyauctions.ie is saying, he's putting in a shameless plug saying there's a bottle of Powers 15 in this month's auction. After tonight's tasting, Anthony, you'll be getting nobody bidding on this, I'd say. But Daniel does say you've got some great bottles in this month's auction. He does, Daniel, doesn't he? Yeah, this is it's a tough one. It's like old rope. It's like very like when lemonade goes flat. It's almost like when a whiskey goes flat is what I'm tasting on this Powers 15, which is incredibly mediocre, to be honest. Gail has a question. Do they still have Tullamore Dew in the Dublin airport for €30? Right, lads? Joe Moore, Thomas, they're not. Tullamore isn't your brand, but tell me if you've got Tullamore Dew in the Dublin airport for €30. All right, what else are you getting from this Powers 15-year-old, lads? Doesn't taste as bad as it smells. Yeah. Is there a link for that auction? Lulu, go to irishwhiskeyauctions.ie. IE is the Irish domain, so go to irishwhiskeyauctions.ie for some of that. Michael's getting damp straw. That's a great nose, yeah. Damp straw. It is definitely there's a wet wood, an old rotting wood nose to me. Yeah, yellow, rotting hay in the field is what I'm getting from this. Aidan is saying that it's pretty much summing up what the Power 73 smells like. And Nick, you're welcome. Wondering where the proper 12 is. You'll have to keep wondering. You won't be making it to my table at all, I'm afraid. But you're welcome to join, and I know you're a big fan of the proper 12, so welcome to the Irish whiskey world. So Joe says he thinks this was bottled some point between 71 and 76, made for the Italian market, but you're talking distilled at the end of the 1950s, beginning of the 1960s. There's an awful bitter aftertaste from it. That's at like the back of my teeth, right at the back of my gums, an awful bitter aftertaste to it. Kevin wondering how Queeveen knows what a drink mat tastes like. Old rotting wood. Yeah, this isn't brilliant now at all, but lads, we had to say, we tried it, you know. So Daniel here to poison me on our tasting, on our first ever live stream, and Daniel's trying to kill me. 95 people now in the stream, that's brilliant. We'll break 100 yet.
We did.
Did we break 100? Oh, brilliant. Okay, we should end now. We'll never make that number again. Queeveen says, it just tastes like whatever it was, it's not that anymore. Jeez, that's a bit of poetry there. You'd know you're a teacher. You know you're a school teacher with beautiful prose like that, Queeveen. You're some man. So George asks if I have to drink the whole lot. So we're here now. Anthony's moved on to his Bushmills distillery exclusive Acacia wood. I love that Bushmills. It's incredible. I'm a big fan of Acacia wood finish. Billy Lighton, master blender of Middleton Distillery, has joined us. He says you're not enjoying it. Let's move on. I know what you're waiting for, Billy. You're waiting for this. We have whiskey royalty with us, folks. Mr. Billy Lighton, and I know he's waiting for this to be opened, I'm sure. Opened. It's half gone by the looks of it. Look, I got a head start on today's tasting. But it's great. We've got distillers, we've got blenders, we've got drinkers, we've got enthusiasts. We've got those who are new to the industry and those like Billy who've been in it for 40 plus years, which is incredible. So we're all having a bit of crack here today on St. Patrick's Day, and where else would we be? And what else would we be doing? Only drinking a drop of whiskey to celebrate Ireland and our health and our safety going forward. Okay, so I didn't enjoy that. Billy, I hope you had no hand in that along the way in Coleraine or Bushmills or Middleton, but that's not a great drop at all. Okay, let me swap this out. Daniel, you tried to poison me. Enough of the poisoning. New glass. And we're going to move on. So, let me see. What questions have we got? Queeveen's out of work. He'll write poetry for whiskey. The school's closed. You could write about whiskey. You could join the two together. All right. So, oh yes, John saying that we've forgotten about the cellars. Not only do we have blenders and manufacturers and producers and bonders and bottlers. John Fleming carry out off license in Killarney. is your man in the southwest of Ireland for all your whiskey needs. There's your free plug now, John. Shane Moore asks if this is the 27-year-old bottle I was kind enough to share with him in California a few weeks ago. It is. We opened this, and whiskey's for sharing. I don't like hoarding whiskey, and I don't like whiskey collecting dust. There's no dust on this bottle, and there never will be, because it'll be empty within a week. This is a spectacular whiskey. Billy, you've done yourself proud and done an incredible job of bringing this, to the market. It's a Redbreast, but like none we've ever tried before. When I first tried this a few weeks ago, I was blown away. So this was officially launched just under 2 weeks ago now in Ireland, and I know a few of you have managed to find yourself some bottles of this. So let's have a little sip of this, because I know it's late in Ireland, and those of you who want to go to bed will want to know what Redbreast 27 tastes like. So a 27-year-old whiskey, and if I say anything about this that is not accurate, the man who blended it and who put this together will surely correct me. 27 years, a mixture of bourbon, ex-bourbon barrels, ex-sherry barrels, and ex-ruby port barrels gives this an incredible new element and there's a new addition to the Redbreast family, that contribution of port, which is absolutely spectacular. So I can talk about it all day long, but I should be pouring it. Pour it in here. Rich colour, even the bottle and the packaging. So the little stand that I am putting all these glasses on happens to be the Redbreast 27 box. So it's a beautiful case. Inside, it's got all the tasting notes, and it's a beautiful box. We're not here to talk about boxes. We're here to talk about whiskey. So Brian wants more Redbreast 27 to come to Ohio. We all do. We absolutely all do. On the nose, it's like a mixture of wine gums meets candied peaches meets... Oh, it's both light and complex at the same time, if that's even possible. Now, when I first tried Redbreast 27 a few weeks ago, I thought it's very light on the nose, and I didn't get as much as I thought 27-year-old was going to give me on the nose. But then I realized it needed a little bit of time to open up, and also it was replaced by just the taste of the palate, and it was so much more complex and more flavorful than the nose. Has anybody tried the Redbreast 27 before? Quivine is opening his Redbreast 27 sample now. Fantastic. You're opening it after a few drinks. You're opening it after the Powers 15-year-old like me, so hopefully that doesn't impact it too much. This is an absolute gorgeous drop, and what a way to celebrate St. Patrick's Day and to toast our health and safety. But yeah, 27 years old, the youngest component whiskey in here is 27 years old. Billy, if you're still on the line, I'd love to know what's the oldest component whiskey in this. So I laughed out loud when I first tasted this. It was that good. But this is bottled at cask strength, 54.6%. And for my money, you don't need any water in this. You don't need a drop in it. It's absolutely beautiful. It is, I keep coming back to this, like a candied peach, rich dark stone fruits. On the nose, it's lighter. On the palate, it's more complex. Shane wants me to give you a drop of the 27. Do you want to do 27? Yeah. Billy says, a little bit like himself, it's getting old, but still youthful. Michael had Redbreast 27 earlier. It's absolutely spectacular. Billy, you've knocked this out of the park. So 21-year-old would have been my desert island whiskey up to now, Redbreast 21, which is an incredible whiskey. And to be able to get, here's Melinda now with her big thirsty head in her for the Redbreast 27, and to be able to get hold of this oak age of stock from Middleton. There you go. For us to be able to experience aged whiskey, aged pot still whiskey like this is absolutely incredible. Obviously, we've got people like Barry Crockett and Billy himself to thank for laying down this stock way back when there was no market 27, 30 years ago for pot still whiskey like there is today. But thanks to their kind of foresight, we have these incredible whiskies. I mean, who was expecting a ruby port contribution to a Redbreast? Daniel says he usually loves cask strength whiskies and never adds water, but thought this got even better with a drop of water. Oh, it's absolutely incredible. Any time I've had a cask strength whiskey from Middleton, I've never found the need to put a drop of water into it. If I've had a cask strength whiskey from other distilleries, for some reason, they tend to be a little bit better with water. Whatever magic they're conjuring up in Middleton. So the Redbreast 32-year-old up to now would have been one of my favourite Redbreasts, the Dream Cask, the first ever Dream Cask would have been my favourite that I'd ever tried. And then, obviously that was a very limited release. What was that? 900, 800 odd bottles that came out. Now we have a 27-year-old permanent addition to the range coming out in batches. This is batch 119, and we'll expect to see some other batches coming out. The top on that before I knock it over. The fact that we get hold of this 27-year-old stock is incredible, and it's a permanent addition to the range. The length of it in your mouth just goes on and on and on. An absolute incredible whiskey. Daniel usually loves cask strength whiskies, but thought that this got even better with a drop of water. Ryan was at the launch, absolutely amazing. Nick wondering if it's worth the price tag. Look, Nick, price is subjective. 4 or 5 years ago, I wouldn't have paid $50 for a bottle of whiskey. I would have thought that was ridiculous to spend that much. But price is subjective. I now have learned the value of good whiskey, and I've learned the stories and the production methods and the care and the time and the passion that's gone into a whiskey. And so value is very subjective, and value has shifted for me over time. So now I'll spend more on a bottle of whiskey that I'll savour and that I'll share with friends and that I'll know the history of and know the story of. And it's just incredible. It's like people paying a lot of money for good bottles of wine. Here now we have incredible bottles of whiskey that we can do the same. Omar saying, hell yes, this is worth it. Look, the price varies depending on where you are, but I would say compared to any other whiskey of similar vintage, compared to any cask strength whiskey of similar vintage, of course it's worth it. And even beyond that, look, it's a 27-year-old Redbreast, folks. Redbreast is as good as it gets for single pots of whiskey, and to get this 27-year-old, I don't know, I'm absolutely a convert. All right, so let me give this to the Redbreast. Deserves that. We'll do another applause for it. It's brilliant. Okay, next question. Gorgeous bottle as well. Yep. Is there another Dream Cask on the way? Possibly, David. David Earls asked, Billy, I asked you this when we were in Boston a few months ago, and you told me that there is plans afoot for a Dream Cask every year, which is fantastic news for all of us, and hopefully that we can get our hands on them. So Daniel, or David, yeah, it looks like there are more Dream Casks on the way. We've also got more royalty in the house. We've got John McDougall, great whiskey drinker, Irish and Scotch. Lorcan wondering what the price per bottle is in the Redbreast 27. It varies. So I've seen it from $399 in Ohio to $599 in California, and I think it's €499 in Ireland. $4.95, Chris says. So Ohio only got 27 bottles of 27-year-old, and they sold out instantly. Irish whiskey at this price point has never sold in Ohio, ever. We've never had whiskies of this vintage. We've never had whiskies of this quality or at this price point. And the fact that they sold out instantly is a tremendous sign for what's happening in Irish whiskey and the value that people are putting on Redbreast, particularly. Now, I'm not going to take any credit for all the Redbreast tastings we've been doing and all the people who've gone from Redbreast tastings to buy 21-year-old in cask strength, but I know that a few from my tastings managed to get a hold of a few of these bottles, which is fantastic. I didn't even get one in Ohio. I had to go to California and spend a bit more money on it, but it's worth it. We won't get to any of the other whiskies because I'll be too busy drinking this for the rest of the night. Let me see. Quivine says Redbreast 27 nose was far more subtle than I expected. Yeah, exactly the same for me. But the mouthfeel is one of the best he's ever had. Really chewable. Absolutely agree. It's like a rich, dark chocolate bar that just sits in your mouth for 5-6 minutes after you've finished your little sup, which is incredible. Joe Moore says it's €480 in duty free. Daniel Pennington hid his 27-year-old on himself to save some, but he's going to grab a final drop. Fair play. Kevin, you're way ahead. Kevin O'Connell, you're a few hours ahead even of Ireland, I think, so you're going to go to bed. Fair play to you. Thanks for joining. Lanny Schnipper, fair play. Welcome. You're joining, drinking some Bushmills. Melinda, my wife, says hello to Mrs. That's Dram Good. There's all these little sub-conversations going on in the stream as well, which is great fun altogether. We're now up to, 86 of us, so we passed 100, which is incredible. So let's throw in an old applause. Like all kinds of great sound effects here, lads. Here's another great one. So that's for the Powers 15-year-old. Not sure what we'll do with this one. And if we sing the Owl Triangle, we'll play this one. And then... Okay, that's for the party started. When whiskey royalty like Billy Lighton joins the party, we play this one. Okay, so Chris, you've had a measure of this to date. You're getting a bottle soon. What else have we got? Everyone is sold on this Redbreast 27. Michael Cully tasted Redbreast 27 on his birthday. It was the most fantastic whiskey he's ever had. I haven't seen a bad word about this whiskey since it's been released, which is a testament to the quality of this. And I can't wait to get my hands on more. We'll have to be saving the shekels to get some more of it, though. Mel, do you have the top of that somewhere? I lose it. Oh, here it is. Can't have it evaporating on us. I'm going to put that to the side there now. While I sip on this one. Okay, so Robert Scott Robinson's wondering if he should crack open Middleton 2018 or 2019. For my money, I thought the 2018 was incredible. One of the finest I'd ever tasted. Now, 2019 is one of the oldest, I think, the oldest Middleton Very Rare that's ever been released. But for me, 2018 is a superior whiskey for my palate. But it's very subjective, isn't it? Ian's off again. Thanks for joining. Glad you jumped in. We'll do more of these. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. This isn't over yet. And I've got 6 or 7 whiskies to go through for those of you who are willing to stay around. So Brian's been searching daily for Redbreast 27. Sad that you haven't found one yet. Well, Brian, maybe I'll be able to share some of this bottle with you when I'm next nearby. But here's the Redbreast 27 for those of you who want to get a good look at it. Fantastic bottle, beautiful matte, kind of a frosted glass with embossed Redbreast on it. It's almost a shame to drink it, but then you try it and you realise it's not a shame at all. Zane Klaus, welcome Zane, familiar face from one of the tastings last week as well in Ohio. You've been drinking some Bua Irish whiskey. So Bua is a new Irish whiskey that's hit the market in Ohio, and it's a collaboration between Pat Byrne of Byrne's Pub in Columbus and Martin Kennedy, former Tullamore Dew ambassador. The two of them partnered up to create a new Irish whiskey that they sourced from Ireland, and they've launched it in Ohio to great success, actually. A light straw-coloured whiskey that's been cast in cast 5 times, actually, I think. Young whiskey, surprisingly flavourful for its age. Very mellow, very light, very spirit-forward, but very good quality for its age. Zane saying that it's more mellow than he expected. Yeah, it's a really enjoyable whiskey, surprisingly, for its age. Stacey's onto the... you're recommending Chateau Leeville Barton all day long. Yeah, Stacey Stearns is a great Green Spot fan. Since I first met you a couple of years back, you've been searching for the wine finishes of Green Spot, and they've now finally managed to... they've now arrived on the shelves in Ohio, which is good news for you. I think that this one should go next. What do you think? This one, Paddy, or O'Connell's, W.D. O'Connell. This is a new whiskey merchant. Dahi O'Connell started a company. This is a 17-year-old single malt finished in Pedro Jimenez casks. But while we're thinking about that, let me see some questions that have come in. Question for Billy, if you're still on the line. How did you settle on 27 years? What was the main driver behind this amazing whiskey to make it a 27-year-old? So why wasn't it 26? Why not 28? Tell us why 27-year-old was the year. Daniel really loved the 27, but do you think the price point is a tad steep when you consider some of the single cask releases? Yeah, I agree with you. It's a lot of money, no doubt about it. And even how good the Redbreast 21 is at 2/5 the price. Yeah, it's that extra 6 years definitely adds price point to it. There's no doubt about it. So it's well, what I would recommend is try this whiskey if you can find it in a pub. It'll be expensive by the measure, but at least you get to try it without having to spend all that money on a bottle if it's a bit more expensive than you want to, more money than you want to spend. Paul James wants to know if there's any Irish tastings coming up. If I venture over this side of the pond again, tell me, Paul James, where are you and which side of the pond are we talking about? I'd say we're all under lockdown for a few months now. I don't think there'll be any tastings for a while. I'm just going to be sitting here downing bottles of Redbreast 27 until I get carted out in a box. No, we won't joke about that. So Nick's talking about, Nick's liking the sign of Paddy Whisky turning up here. Tim McKee saying this Paddy is amazing. John recommends I go with W.D. O'Connell's. Nick, W.D. O'Connell's. Eric wants to know what's my port finished Irish whiskey. Well, Redbreast 27 isn't port finished, it's port aged. That's maybe the best port contributed whiskey I've ever had in my life. Other than that, what other port whiskies port finished? I don't know, maybe we put it back to the group. What are port finished whiskies? Okay, the O'Connell's is the one I think people want me to try next. Okay. Paul James, you're in the wee County Louth. I was hoping to be back in Ireland in May. My nephew, my godson, is having his communion, if that even goes ahead. And of course, with the flights now, I don't think I'm going to make it at all. So the next thing I'm going to move on to after this Redbreast 27, by popular opinion, is W.D. O'Connell. I'd encourage you all to Google W.D. O'Connell. Daithí O'Connell I met him at Whisky Live in Dublin late last year, November. Got to chatting, got to learn that our paths had crossed it many years before in different lives and different businesses, which is testament to how small this world is and all paths lead back to whiskey. That's Dramgood actually contributing there that Method and Madness 28-year-old is maybe the best port finish whiskey that they've ever seen. Billy has come back with an answer. Billy Lighton, Master Blender at Middleton Distillery, staying with the Redbreast age theme of multiples of 3. The availability of the port component means that we can have a consistent supply into the future. There is a nugget of information you're not getting anywhere else, folks. Redbreast age themes of multiples of 3. You've got your 12, 15, 21, and 27. And we've got an available port component that allows us to have a consistent supply into the future. This is incredible information that we're getting here. Lads, we're onto something here. We can come together, ask questions, talk about the whiskies that we love, and have people who've made the whiskies answer those very questions for us. What an opportunity we have here to do more of these things. But that's a great answer. Thanks for that, Billy. Peter Duggan's off to bed. Thanks for joining us. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Michael Colley talks about Clonakilty having a port finish. You're absolutely right. Yeah, that's right. Port finish in the Clonakilty. I forgot about that one. But yeah, a lot of mentions of the Method and Madness 28-year-old. See how long I'm taking with this Redbreast 27. I'm taking my time. I can't finish it too quickly. You're all going to have to wait. I don't care how long you have to wait before I move on to this. But I'm sipping and savouring this one. George from Utah, great point. Tyrconnell has a port finish. Absolutely right, forgot about that one. Method and Madness 28-year-old, mentioned again, which is a €2,000 whiskey. So that makes the Redbreast 27, by comparison, a real bargain. Well spotted by Brian Riley. Suzanne is wondering if this is a new batch of the same O'Connell or totally different. Is it the peated one? So there are 2 whiskies that were released by W.D. O'Connell. There was the single malt 17-year-old Pedro Jimenez finish, and there was the peated single malt. This, and now they're on to, I believe, what they're calling this. It's the second batch, but I think it's called batch 1. This is not the peated one. This is a single malt and Pedro Jimenez finish. It's unpeated. But this is the first one that they ever launched. So this is their batch 0. If they're calling the current one batch 1, this is batch 0. Shane McDonald saying that this is a great way to spend a kind of a bummer St. Patrick's Day. Thanks, Shane. Glad you could join us. Molly, same. Glad you could join us. Daniel wondering, so when will we see a 24-year-old Redbreast? Good question. That is a multiple of 3, putting Billy Lighton on the spot. Okay, so Chris Hennessy, who is working with W.D. O'Connell, has joined the conversation on this one, that the sample I have is the 17-year-old, but the one I have is at cask strength. So the regular was released not at cask strength, I believe, right? Okay. Ryan Leonard, who's joined from Searsons, he mentions that they have a bottle in Searsons of Bagot Street in Dublin. That must be the Redbreast 27, I think you're probably referring to, Ryan. Thanks for joining the conversation. Casey Ball, welcome to the conversation. Casey, California Casey, what's up? You're very welcome. John Fleming again in Killarney mentioning that the Method and Madness 28-year-old was a limited release, hence the price, and the 27-year-old is a core range. So that's true. This is going to be available, to the best of our knowledge, for quite a while. So while there was a mad dash for people to get hold of this, this is the batch one, and I know anything with a batch number on it people scramble for. It's going to be available consistently, which is incredible news for us whiskey drinkers. So I would personally rather have a Redbreast 27 than 400 or 500 euro whiskies. Honest to God, it's that good. Now, depends on the €100 whiskies, of course, but for my money, that is an absolute cracker of a whiskey. All right, so Casey's doing homework. He can't decide what to pour. Okay, so this cask strength, W.D. O'Connell, so we're going to have to swap out the glasses again. So I'm down to the last bit. Oh, thanks, man. Oh, washing the glasses as well as drinking the powers over here. Good for you. Thank you. All right, I'm going to put this to the side. Okay, clean glass. Thanks to Mrs. Stories and Sips. We're now going to move on to W.D. O'Connell. Dahi was hoping to join us tonight, but due to more pressing matters for Dahi and pressing matters like a 35-week pregnant wife, I think we'll excuse him from joining and know that we're tasting this in his honour. And Chris Hennessy is representing the brand and giving us good feedback. So this is a cask strength. Pour the drop in here. Billy, I hope you don't mind them using a Redbreast 27 box as a table. Multiple uses. You see, you spend your €400 or €500 in a whiskey and you get a free table. All right, we're going to put this up here. All right. I wonder is Dahi after joining us? I see mention of Dahi here somewhere. No. All right, let me see. Yeah, baby pressing. Billy replying to Daniel about the core age range for Redbreast. At the age range of the 21-year-old is 21 to 28. So there would be a big overlap if there was a 24-year-old. That's a great point that Billy shared there. So Redbreast 21-year-old that we know and love, similar to the 27, has a 21 on the front of it for obvious reasons. It's called a 21-year-old whiskey, but the component whiskies inside can be far older. So by law in Ireland, you have to state the youngest whiskey component that is in that bottle. So in this case, the youngest component whiskey here is 27 years old. So Redbreast 21 can range from 21 to 28 years in age. So there'd be no reason to release a 24-year-old because that 21 to 28-year-old range is already covered by the Redbreast 21. Anytime you see any age on a bottle, that is the youngest whiskey. Even on Paddy here, this is guaranteed 7 years old, Paddy Centenary. There could be an 8-year-old whiskey in there. There could be a 9-year-old whiskey. But by law, we must declare the youngest. Paul Milligan. Paul and Rachel, great to see you guys. We miss you. Hope we'll see you guys soon. You're raising a glass of Redbreast 21, which is fantastic. We hope you're going to get your hands... I know. So let me tell a story, guys. Paul Milligan in Ohio drove 2 hours to get hold of his bottle of Redbreast 21 today for the tasting tonight. He drove from Columbus to the Hocking Hills to get hold of his bottle. Such was both his thirst and his dedication to Redbreast. So Billy Lighton, I hope you're seeing the love for this Redbreast brand around the world. Drove 2 hours each way. Fair play to you, Paul. What else have we got here? Happy Paddy's Day, Fiacra. Fiacra, I believe you're in Asia, as far as I remember. Happy Paddy's Day to you. Chris Hennessy mentions that this W.D. O'Connell's was at cask strength at Whisky Live when anybody sampled it. Okay, so Billy's delighted that we're repurposing the packaging into a table. So for all of you who have Redbreast 21 boxes or 27 boxes, just know that they make wonderful tables for live Facebook streams. So I'm now moving on to W.D. O'Connell. whiskey merchants. So W.G. O'Connell is not a distillery. Dahi doesn't distill the whiskey. Dahi procures the whiskey, and Dahi releases the whiskey under his own brand. This is something that has been done for hundreds of years in the Irish whiskey industry. You don't have to be a distiller to sell Irish whiskey. You have to be a distiller to make it. And W.G. O'Connell is a whiskey bottler and a merchant, and he finds and procures mature stock and sells it on under different brand names. An incredibly important role. There are also whiskey bonders in Ireland who are buying mature whiskey and in some cases aging it further. In most cases blending from a library of spirits to create unique flavour profiles. So there's many different characters and participants in the Irish whiskey world, which is great to see, and so many of them joining us here. So here we have, wow, this is amazing. So Chris, thanks for that information. So as I'm nosing this, so what we have here is W.G. O'Connell, 17-year-old. It is 100% 17-year-old bourbon cask, double distilled from the Cooley Distillery. It's single malt, and it has been finished for 6 months in Pedro Jimenez casks. So those of you who were part of my tasting during the week in Columbus, Ohio, I opened up a bottle that was a Pedro Jimenez influenced whiskey, and that was the Redbreast 20-year-old, the Dream cask. Here we have a 17-year-old single malt Pedro Jimenez finish. So the last 6 months of its life has been in Pedro Jimenez casks. Mel, do you want some? No? What are you moving on to? I actually don't empty that one. That's still got a dribble of Redbreast 27 in it. Okay, so on the nose, so I don't get a lot of the Pedro Jimenez on the nose. Definitely get that bourbon influence, that single malt biscuity quality coming through. Oh, it's quite mellow on the nose, quite light, very fragrant. So this is, what's the cask strength of this, Chris? Oh, that's very unusual. Very biscuity, very like graham crackers on the mouth. Very thick mouthfeel for a single malt. Very, yeah, really, really different mouthfeel. Really. Getting a bit of straw, getting biscuity crackers. For some reason the crackers keep coming to the front. Not a length to it. Wow. Yeah, that's a really different whiskey. I don't get the Pedro Jimenez as much maybe as I have in other Pedro Jimenez whiskies, but that's a really interesting whiskey. JP is off to bed. JP, fair play to you for joining all the way from Cork. I appreciate it. We'll see you soon, buddy. Lorcan's wondering if anyone's ever had the Middleton Whisky Academy Batch 2. He's a bottle and wondering if it's worth opening or keeping it to sell. Lorcan, open it. Open everything. Open the whiskies. Nobody spent their time making these whiskies to just be peddled and stored and sold and gathering dust. I think whiskies for drinking. I'd love to hear your thoughts on what that tastes like. Guys, I've heard people who've opened that Whisky Academy Batch 2 and they've loved it. So by all means, open that up. Will I be at Whisky Live? Michael's wondering in 2020. Michael, we don't know what the world is going to look like next week, let alone 2020, at the end of 2020. I would love to be at Whisky Live next year. I've been there the last 2 years, and it's been an incredible experience. Great to meet people. I hope to be there. You know, I couldn't compare this to anything. The 17-year-old cask strength, Pedro Jimenez finish, single malt, 100% bourbon, double distilled. I don't know that I've had anything like this before. But again, I'm very new to this whiskey game too. A lot of people here on their line have a lot more experience with whiskey than I do. Oranges, zest, citrus on the front of the mouth, long length, crackers, kind of green grass, close, more green grass than straw. Very unusual, very nice actually, very nice. John Fleming from Killarney says that we should do Whisky Live from Ohio. John, we'll do it from anywhere where we have a computer. If we can do more like this and get 100 people to turn up with a glass, we'll be laughing. Okay, so anybody tell me if they've ever had W.D. O'Connell's 17-year-old single malt. I'd love to get your thoughts. It's a very different whiskey. I don't think I've ever had anything like it. Again, for a cask strength whiskey, not unlike the Redbreast 27, I don't feel the need to add water, but I'm going to add a drop to this one. Melinda's lovely water bottle. She's contributed, repurposed. Drop in. Whoa, it's not. Okay. Drop of water. Yeah, Nick Ryan telling me to add a drop of water to it. Back of the mouth, I get that biscuity, barley. Again, I keep coming back to these dry crackers. The water definitely brought to the fore more citrus in that one. But yeah, this is a great brand to watch. So Dahi from W.D. O'Connell. So Dahi O'Connell has brought out these were his first whiskies. This one and a whiskey called Bill Phil. And Bill Phil was named after, I believe, William Phillip, his uncle. But Bill Phil is a peated single malt, if I'm not mistaken. And it's very unusual to see peated whiskey in Ireland. Up to now, we've had Connemara, and which is Melinda's favourite whiskey. She loves a good peated whiskey. Very unusual to see peated whiskey making a return, and it's a great thing to see it making a return to Ireland. Yeah. Give me the screaming to high heavens. She's delighted. There was a history of drying our malt with open peat, open turf fires a long time ago. That has been replaced with dry heat. So the Scottish have continued their open drying of malt, and we don't do that in Ireland so much. But it'd be great to see a return to it. I can't stand peated whiskey. I can't take it. To me, it's just medicine. Can't touch it. So I don't know why. Maybe over time I will be won around to peated whiskey. It's funny because, believe it or not, I got into my most favourite sipping whiskey when I first got into whiskey was Jameson Black Barrel. And then one day I sipped Redbreast and I thought, oh my God, that's awful. It's too strong. It's too complex. My palate wasn't ready for it. And I came back to it a few years later and I took a sip because I had nothing left in the house. I thought, okay, I'll have a drop of the Redbreast from the same bottle. And I absolutely loved it. I fell in love with it instantly and I became an instant Redbreast fan. So I'm wondering if as our palates mature and we try different things and we learn about them, do we find new things to like and new things to love? So peated whiskey might make it for me. If it does, it opens up a whole new world for me because, by God, there's a lot of peated whiskies out there further afield than Ireland. Michael Cully mentioning that West Cork have some peated whiskey. They don't have peated whiskey so much as they have a peated cask, as far as I know, the Glengarriff series, where they've lit the cask on fire with peat, not unlike the seaweed casks from Curragh. So I don't know that they have a peated malt, but they have a peated cask, to the best of my knowledge. Jack Jim O'Brien was wondering, was Phil a farrier from West Limerick? He could well have been. Bill Phil, the man who Bill Phil, the peated whiskey, was named for. He might have been. Bruce Brooks doesn't like the peat either. Devin is sipping on some Connemara right now. Melinda, you got a fan there, Connemara? You swear Melinda made Connemara. She's so excited about it. Cuivine has the same exact views on peat, but the Bill Phil completely converted him. Early days of peat, though. Yeah, it is very early days. So I have some Bill Phil in my whiskey locker that I've got to go and pull out. And that's Dramgood weighing in on Bill Phil, saying that the peated Irish whiskey is tremendous. He's going to open it and review it, and it's the door to peated Irish whiskey for many. He loves that Melinda likes peat. Rose absolutely detests peated whiskey. Octomore drives her mental. Yeah, I'd be the same. So me and Rose will hang out and we'll drink non-peated whiskey, and then Omar and Melinda will drink peated whiskey together. Suzanne, you started with Hot Powers, then you went on to enjoy Middleton Very Rare, then on to fall in love with Ardbeg. That's some journey there, from Hot Powers to Ardbeg. A lot of different taste profiles on the way there. Yeah, this is very unusual. Chris, thanks for the tasting notes and the kind of the strength on this one, on the W.D. O'Connell. Lovely whiskey. Very floral now as it's opening up. The citrus notes are coming out on this single malt for me. Really nice. Ryan Leonard is wondering if he should try Middleton single casks. Single cask releases 2002 and 2005. Would you recommend starting out? I don't know that a single cask from Middleton 2002 or 2005 or any single cask from Middleton is where you'd start out. I think there are other whiskies that I would start out on your way to a Middleton single cask. I've not seen a Middleton single cask for less than 200 or 300 euros a bottle, which puts it out of the range of many to start out on. I'd start, if I was to start on, well, it depends if these Middleton single casks are pot stills, or I think a lot of the single casks are pot stills from Middleton, aren't they? I'd probably start on something like I'd start on a Redbreast, a very different style of pot still though to the Middleton single cask. Look, if you can start there, by all means, but it'd be an expensive place to start. That's Dramgood is saying, for anyone who asks about Bill Phil and whether he was a farrier, yes, he was. He was a blacksmith in West Limerick, very famous in these lands. Great stuff. James Kearns, good buddy of mine in Ireland, says that we're into the 18th in Ireland now, so it's no longer St. Patrick's Day in Ireland. It's now the 18th of March. We've been going for 2 days and 2 nights, and people are still with us, which is incredible. All right, so it's time to move on now from this one. So that was brilliant. I'm going to put this to the side. I need to come back to this though later this evening, so I don't want that emptied. So now we're out of glassware. Actually, no. Let me finish this one. Redbreast 27, still a drop here. Okay, so Shane Moore is asking, how are the tasting notes on the Silent Distillery Series 45-year-old? So anyone who's been paying attention to the Irish Whiskey World lately has seen that Middleton released a 45-year-old whiskey, the oldest Irish whiskey that is currently available. I think there's been an older one-time released. Cadenheads might have bottled one for 46 years old, but 45 years old, and it was distilled by Max Crockett. Max Crockett is the father of Barry Crockett. Barry Crockett was born in the Middleton distillery. He took over from his father as the master distiller. He is still alive and with us, thank God. He is the master distiller emeritus. He will always be the master distiller emeritus, and Brian Nation, the master distiller, took over from him. Those 3 distillers have had their hands somehow in this series of Silent Distillery whiskies that have been released. Guide price of 35,000 euros a bottle, or $40,000 I believe, and only 48 bottles ever released. So Shane, none of these bottles contain Middleton Silent Distillery unless Omar's after sneaking some into one of these, which I very much doubt he is. Nick Ryan has a great point about malted barley, which is the case for Connemara. He says that most malted barley that is peated comes from Scotland, and it could be interesting to taste the difference in the turf from different areas, in that there's a difference in taste from bog to bog. So Connemara is not malted in Ireland, it's malted in Scotland, which makes it a little bit Scottish, even though it's got a very Irish name. Connor Winders is saying Happy Paddy's Day. He's off to bed. I know a lot of you who stayed up very late in Ireland to join, which is incredible. Fair play to you. Although it's only 12:15. Although for many of you, you've probably been handling the kids all day long. You're due a good night's sleep, and fair play to you for joining. Anthony Sheehy says that I can buy the 45-year-old Middleton, and I know why he's saying that, because it's on auction right now. One of the bottles has made it to Anthony Sheehy's auction house, irishwhiskeyauctions.ie. Do I get 10% commission now, Anthony, for mentioning your auction site so much? He says, buy it and you can tell us. Strangely enough, he has one in this month's auction. Again, shameless plug. Anthony's a great man for the shameless plugs. I wonder will he have shameless commissions when that sells now from somebody from this stream. Hopefully he doesn't forget about us. Good night from Dublin. Fair play Dublin. Jonathan Boyle joining us. He finished off a bottle of Power Signature. Fantastic. William Considine, fair play to you for joining. You're drinking some Dead Rabbit and Encinitas. I love Encinitas. I wish I was in Moonlight Beach right now in Encinitas as the sun goes down. It would be a beautiful place to be. Thanks for joining us. Dead Rabbit is very popular in California, actually. And that's me finishing the Redbreast 27. Oh my God. This sweetness, but this rich, dark sweetness. I don't even know how to describe it. I'm not advanced enough in my whiskey descriptions, but a rich, dark chocolate filled with a rich, dark liqueur. Oh, it's absolutely incredible. Somebody is mentioning Kirkland Irish whiskey. I believe Kirkland is the Costco brand, which is also Irish whiskey. If it comes from Ireland and follows the rules of Irish whiskey, it's Irish whiskey, irrespective of the name of it. Billy Lighton is checking out in Port Stewart in Northern Ireland. Billy, thank you so much for joining us. We didn't expect to have you. Hopefully you'll join more of these. Really thrilled to have your experience and your input here, and hopefully I get to see you soon. Thanks for joining and for contributing. Tim says, all hail the Crockett's. Yeah, Barry Crockett, Max Crockett, legends, absolute legends in Ireland and the whiskey world. We're absolutely. I remember touring the archive in Middleton with Carol Quinn, the historian and the archivist, and she was sharing stories, individual human stories, like things that happened on a Tuesday. Like, here's a great story from a Tuesday in 1961 in Middleton, and she'd give me 10 minutes of an amazing story. And then she'd give me another one from 1954, another one from 1876. And then she looked at me and she said, Barry, we don't have to make up any stories at all. The truth with Irish whiskey is far more interesting, which I thought was a remarkable comment, because it's true. We don't need Blarney and leprechauns and paddy hats to sell Irish whiskey. We just need to talk about how great the ingredients are, how incredible the distilling is, how the passion, the people, the places behind the product to really sell and connect with people, because it doesn't need to be more complicated than that. And I'm always appalled when people have to make up stories and make up fabrications around characters around Irish whiskey, when if we only talked about where it came from, who made it, how long it's been aged, we'd probably sell far more of it. Okay, time for another vote. Joe Moore, it's way past your bedtime, but look, maybe one more. He's moved on to the Dargailloch Bluebell Forest. All right, you're getting a little applause there now, Joe Moore. Well done. Let me see, what else have we got here? Cuivine, who invented the fire that burned the peat? That's a great question. I have no idea. John Fleming's mentioning that Waterford. Yeah, great things are going to come out of Waterford soon. Actually, yeah, Waterford has a peated whiskey. Interestingly enough, I don't know that they're talking about it, so I'm not going to talk too much about it. But there is something coming out of Waterford that's peated in due course. Jack Jim O'Brien mentions that West Cork distillers charred their barrels with peat. Yeah, that's what I understood too. Ryan Leonard's going to tune in from now on. Fantastic. We might have to make this a regular thing. Should we make it a weekly get-together? What if we did a weekly live stream about Irish whiskey? Who'd be in for that? Give me a thumbs up or a yeah or a woo, let's do that, or something to tell me that this is a good thing to do. There's 54 of us here now in different parts of the world, which is absolutely mind-blowing. But I'd love to know, would you turn up again? Would you come and join for more whiskey tastings? I'm not even halfway done. I don't care if you stay or go. I hope you stay, but I'm going to keep drinking whiskey and talking about them. So please drink along with me. We've got some great ones still to go. All right, here's the choice now. A Jameson from the 1950s or a Paddy Centenary Edition from 2013, I believe. Very different whiskies, but both of them are single pot still whiskies. So let me tell you about this Jameson. 3-star Jameson, 7-year-old pure pot still. Oh, that's interesting. They're both 7-year-old pot stills. Head to head here now, lads. Circa 1954 to 1962 for the Jameson. Malted barley, oats and wheat. You do not see wheat in Irish whiskey today. It's a very, very difficult thing to distill with. Wheat and oats are very unusual and very rare in Irish whiskey. We're seeing some of them turn up. Drumshanbo has a pot still whiskey with oats. And there's a few others experimenting. Blackwater Distillery are experimenting with that. But here we have 2 pot still whiskies, 7 years old. Let me see what you're saying here now. Weekly would be great, 100%. Yes, people would turn up. Yes. That's Dram Good is off to bed. Fair play to you, Omar, for joining. We have to have more of these. If you don't, I'll drink all the samples. You've loads of samples for me in your whiskey room that are mine. Fair play to you for holding on to them. Okay, so we're going to do more of these. That's the consensus here. Live from Kerry, John Fleming is still in. Nicholas is here for weekly tastings. All right. Joe Moore says, in the words of Stone Cold Steve Austin, give me a hell yeah. All right, hell yeah, Joe Moore. Weekly, definitely. Okay, so Do the Jameson. Okay. Happy St. Patrick's Day. Michael. Yay. Michael Coughlin. Delighted to see you. A gentleman who I met in Palace Bar in Dublin probably 14 months ago. My first Whisky Live. Michael, you were a gentleman then, and you were a gentleman last time I met you too. I'm going to move on to the Jameson 1954 to 1962. Oh, the nose on this. Guys, I'm really excited about this. I'm overly excited. I don't know why I'm so excited about this. This comes from the old Bow Street distillery in Dublin. If you've ever been to the Jameson distillery in Dublin, you'll note that it's not a distillery at all. It's a heritage centre. It's a visitor centre. But it used to be a distillery. It used to be the distillery. It was founded in 1780 by John Jameson and distilled there until the early 1970s before moving to Middleton in County Cork, where Jameson has been distilled ever since. But there was incredible innovation that took place in Bow Street in Dublin. And the fact that we have a bottle here, a sample from the Bow Street distillery, blows my mind. 7-year-old, pure pot still whiskey. Now the recipe for this pot still whiskey would not be allowed today by law. So this is when I say it wouldn't be allowed by law, is that the rules have changed in terms of the classification of what whiskey is. A pot still whiskey today must contain a minimum of 30% malted barley, 30% unmalted barley, and then 5% what they call other, which could be oats, corn, rye, wheat, etc. This may have more than 5% oats or wheat in it, which would preclude it from being called a pot still whiskey. It would just be an Irish whiskey. In fact, I think it would fall under the category of a blend, as far as I know. So this is incredible that we're getting to sample this today. And thanks to Chris Hennessy for giving this to us. So imagine this now. The age on this is between 1954 and 1962. So what was happening in the world in 1954? My God, 7 years after the end of World War II, this was distilled in Dublin, which is incredible to think. 1954, Ireland wouldn't have had a penny. Ireland would have been impoverished at the time, yet they were still distilling and exporting all around the world, which is incredible to see, or to remember, to remind ourselves. Isn't it amazing that after, 70 years, 68 years, that there's still a nose on the whiskey, that it hasn't just disintegrated, that it hasn't just dissolved, it hasn't just evaporated, that it's still got a character to it. On the nose of this are cloves, cinnamon, spices, allspice. Mel, put your nose on this. This is really spicy. Do you get...
Oh, yeah.
Isn't that spicy? Isn't there cinnamon or something in that? What is that? Cloves. Clove rocks. We used to get these sweets when we were young in Ireland. Cloves? You get cloves as well? That's incredible. Nick Ryan from Toman Gate says it would be interesting to do a chemical analysis of the compounds in it. It could fall under a single grain whiskey. That's a great point. It could. Boy, the nose on this is very different. A lot of spice. Wow. You open up, this on the palate. It's like opening an old library book.
Oh.
Yeah, here, taste this. Oh. It's like opening a book. You go into an old bookshop from the 1800s, and you open that up and you smell those books, that beautiful smell of old books. I'm getting that immediately now when I taste this, like straight on the palate. Old yellowing pages, dog-eared pages is what I'm getting. Are you getting the same?
Yeah.
Isn't that good?
Oh, God, yeah.
This is a 7-year-old single pot still whiskey from the 1950s, would you believe? Which is incredible. Wow. It's very... So you got that clove on the nose, and then there's an oily finish, oily mouthfeel to this pot still. I can't help but get a little touch of sulfur to this as well. This has held up extraordinarily well for a 7-year-old whiskey from the 1950s. Boy, there's a creaminess to this. Yeah, Chris, you're getting similar things, right? Allspice, clove rocks, yeah, exactly. Motor oil, yeah, absolutely. William Considine is stealing my library book description. It absolutely is, William, like opening a library book, an old, not even a library book, an old book in a bookstore in London that has 4 people go in a day, and the owner just keeps it going because he loves books, and nobody's ever opened the books. That's the smell. It's beautiful. This is a fantastic whiskey for a 7-year-old pot still from the 1950s. Yeah, the oiliness, the motor oil is a great description, Chris. Absolutely great description. Yeah, really different. So Jameson obviously is how most Americans first encounter Irish whiskies through Jameson, and the history of Jameson is maybe not as well known as the green original bottle that everybody has fallen in love with, and oftentimes first time an American has had an encounter with Irish whiskey is Jameson on the floor of the bar at 2 o'clock in the morning doing a shot of Jameson. And look, while I always maintain there's no wrong way to drink a whiskey, whether you shoot it or you mix it, a little bit of me dies inside every time somebody shoots a good whiskey, only because it has spent so many years aging in a barrel. In many cases, well, in every case, a minimum of 3 years, but in many cases, 10, 15, 20, 30 years in a barrel. Don't we owe it something, some time on our side to give back and say, you know what, we should savor this, we should take our time with it. But in any case, if Jameson Original at 2 o'clock in the morning on the floor of a bar is your entree to Irish whiskey, you're very welcome to the Irish whiskey world. And the good news is we have incredible whiskies to give you to follow on from this original Jameson. Incredible whiskies. So Jameson is by far, of course, the best-selling Irish whiskey in the world and is a top 10 selling spirit in the world. There was a time when Irish whiskey was the best-selling spirit in the world, late 1700s, early 1800s. But there was a period from the, I would say, late 1800s to the mid 1900s when Irish whiskey went from 150, 200 distilleries in Ireland all the way down to just 3 distilleries in Ireland in mid-1960s in the Republic of Ireland. You had Jameson in Bow Street in Dublin, you had the Powers Distillery in Dublin, in John's Lane, and you had Middleton, which is the Murphy Distillery in County Cork. Predominantly, these were the 3. And of course, Irish whiskey was on its knees by the 1960s. Prohibition, Anglo-Irish trade war, the rise of Scotch whiskey, the rise of the coffee still, the tall column continuous still invented by an Irishman, Father Matthew, the temperance priest, all contributing to the decline of Irish whiskey to the point where distilleries in the 1960s were distilling for weeks, months maximum out of the year. And this was not a situation that could go on. And so many distilleries shut their doors. Tullamore Dew shut their door in 1953. A lot of people don't realise that they haven't released new liquid from a Tullamore distillery since the 1950s. It's all been distilled predominantly in Middleton in County Cork. But this period of decline really affected Irish whiskey. It virtually disappeared from around the world. Jameson in the 1960s was made in Dublin. In 1966, the Powers family decided that in order to save the Irish whiskey industry from the Scots, who could have come in and bought up the 3 remaining distilleries, the Powers family gathered all other families. They gathered the Jameson family and they gathered the Murphy family in County Cork for some secret meetings. And they gathered them to find a way to save Irish whiskey. And the Powers family had a dramatic suggestion. They said, we have a way to save Irish whiskey, but it's not going to be pretty. We have to shut down all production in Dublin and move all of our distilling to Cork, where we'll merge all of our operations under one umbrella company. Now, this was a dramatic thing for companies like Powers and Jameson that had been distilling since the 1780s and 1790s in Dublin to move down to Cork. But they did so in order to save Irish whiskey. They knew they were on their last roll of the dice. So Jameson stopped distilling in 1972-73 in Dublin and moved their distilling down to Cork, down to Middleton. Powers also shut their doors in Dublin. And since 1970, what was the opening of the new Middleton distillery in 1975, all distilling has happened for Powers and Jameson in Middleton and County Cork. Now that has allowed continuity of production, it's allowed continuity of the brands, it's allowed continuity of history, which would have been lost had pride or ego taken over and had these distilleries decided, or these owners decided, no, we were Dublin distilleries from day one, we should stay Dublin distilleries. And this would have been a huge decision to move to Cork because, in fact, for much of the history of the Dublin distilleries, they fought the non-Dublin distilleries. They talked about the non-Dublin whiskey. So much so that whiskies, they really railed against non-Dublin whiskies, and they maintained that Dublin whiskey was the best whiskey. So the thought of distilling in Cork would have been a tough pill to swallow for many. But Jameson did it. They moved production, Powers moved production, and Murphy Distillery in Middleton, which would have been home to the likes of Paddy, which we haven't moved on to yet, which we will. Paddy Irish Whiskey, amongst other brands. There was a Middleton whiskey that came out of there too. It all moved to Middleton. So the history of Jameson and the history of Powers and the history of Paddy is an incredible study in Irish history and maybe global kind of socio-economic history too, as to what has been happening in the world since from the late 1800s all the way up to the mid-1960s, which is incredible history. But what a privilege to have a 1950s Jameson from Bow Street, no less, in my hand. And the nose that's coming off that is absolutely incredible. All the Michaels are going to bed in Ireland. Michael Cully, Michael Coughlin, thank you so much for joining. Antonis wants me to ship this to him. I will, Antonis. I'll give you the dregs of this. I'll pour it in a watertight envelope and we'll send it to Ohio for you. Robert says that his dad will only drink Jameson or Middleton very rare. Tell your dad he's a smart man. Chris, always a oracle of knowledge. Chris Hennessy, ladies and gentlemen, on Instagram as Flair Ireland. Follow Chris Hennessy if it's the last thing you do. His information is incredible. I need to have Chris on an episode of Stories and Sips. Chris says the pot still mash bills back in the day would be tracked in distillers' notebooks as they relied on crops. If you can imagine after World War II, the majority of the crops would have gone throughout the war without the land going fallow. And to pump nutrients back into the land, all styles of cereals would be planted. So mixed cereals to build up mash bills was extremely common, be it flavour profile, availability or cost. There's tons of determining factors to why mash bills continuously changed. Incredible. Absolutely incredible, Chris. Anytime Chris sends me a message, I learn something. So Nick Ryan from Thomond Gate mentions that spirits can mature in glass or develop a better mouthfeel, texture, plus aroma will shift to a more older scent, hence the old book smell. That's great information, Nick. Cheers for that. Jack Jim O'Brien wonders, was rye used much in Irish whiskey? So rye is obviously a non-native grain to Ireland. Rye has not been used a lot in Irish whiskey. I know the Kilbeggan have a single grain with rye. Chris Hennessy might have a better understanding of that. John Fleming's wondering if Pot Still Will is here. I don't think he is. Pot Still Will is another great character on Facebook and Instagram who has a tremendous historic knowledge of pot still whiskies. Guys, the history of Irish whiskey is incredible. And the fact that we have people like Chris Hennessy, Pot Still Will, Leo Phelan, some great guys out there who have made it their life's work to just absorb and learn about Irish whiskey and share that knowledge. Honestly, it's an absolute privilege to have these guys with us. Joe Moore from Dublin Airport, who told me he was going to bed an hour ago, is still awake. And he shares the Jameson motto, the Latin, which is on every bottle. Is it on this one? It is. It's on the Jameson crest. I'll show it to you there. So this is the Jameson crest. And at the bottom of that gold crest, it says Sine Metu, which means without fear. Survive and thrive together, which is a great motto to have, especially considering that they did survive and they did thrive together, and together with the Powers family and the Murphy family helped Irish whiskey survive and thrive. There's a great through line from the 60s up to today. So Barry Crockett, the master distiller emeritus, who gave us the Middleton Very Rare series, he trained in the Powers John's Lane distillery in Dublin before coming back to Middleton and taking over from his dad in the Middleton distillery. So he would have had experience in that old style of pot still manufacture, pot still distillation in Dublin. And then he moved down to Cork and then took over the manufacture and the production of producing of pot still whiskey in Middleton. So Chris shares that, yeah, there's not a ton of rye in Ireland. It is an American, pretty much a predominantly American grain, but there are loads of different varieties of each of the oats, malted barley, corn, etc. Let me see. Yeah, so people saying they're trying to follow Chris Hennessy. You're a popular lad, Chris, but your followings are turned off. Go to Instagram, Steve. Go to Flair Ireland. Chris is on there, and he's a great source of knowledge altogether. Has anybody who's still on the stream ever been to the Bow Street distillery, the old Jameson distillery in Dublin? It's an incredible place. It's the only place in Dublin that can actually mature whiskey. So there's one room in the Bow Street distillery where whiskey is aging, maturing, and that is the whiskey that is going into Jameson 18-year-old cask strength. It's the only room in Dublin that has a fire license that allows it to age a flammable liquid. I think they have about 80 or 90 barrels aging in that one room. And what a flammable room that is. Imagine this now. So the Bow Street Distillery, the visitor centre, is right in the heart of Dublin. If that was to go up in flames, the whole city would go up. None of the other distilleries in Dublin, Teeling, Dublin Liberties Distillery, Pierce Lyons, Roe & Co., none of them mature their whiskey in Dublin. Instead, they mature outside of Dublin, in Dundalk and other places, County Louth. But Jameson's the only place that's got a maturation room in their warehouse, or in their distillery. So I recommend going to check that out. The smell when you walk inside will take your breath away. Shane was there a few weeks ago. I know you picked up a few things in the gift shop there too. George has been there. Yeah, that room smells divine. It does, doesn't it? Suzanne, you were there in 2018. Anthony Sheehy, Teeling might argue with that fact. That's true. Teeling might argue with that fact. They have, are we talking about their 2 or 3 barrels that they have with their kids' names on them as you do the tour? Teeling might argue with that fact. We won't fall out over it. George mentions that Teeling's is outside of Dublin. There's also an issue with mould. Teeling's age outside of Dublin. Okay, so I don't think we have anybody here from Teeling. But Suzanne, you mentioned that Teeling has a much better bar and shop area than Dublin. Yeah, than Bow Street. Yeah, Bow Street is definitely slammed all of the time. It is an absolute. The crowds in Bow Street is incredible. So Joe Moore so we just spoke about a Jameson 18-year-old Bow Street, the whiskey that's aging in the heart of Dublin. Joe Moore from Dublin Airport is a patriot here. He has opened up a bottle of it, and it's his last drop of the night in line with the current topic. Jameson 18-year-old Bow Street, 55.3%. I actually have a bottle of the Jameson 18-year-old. Mel, could you pass me the box inside here of the Jameson 18-year-old? I'll show people. So this Jameson 18-year-old, so the cask strength ages in the distillery, but I don't believe the regular ages in Bow Street, but the regular ages in Middleton, as far as I know. Kevin says that Bow Street's maturation room has a magic ability to increase the value of the whiskey house. There it does. All right, so speaking about Bow Street, Jameson 18-year-old. This is a Jameson 18-year-old. Lovely box. Magic door. Slides open. This is not the cask strength version. There is a cask strength version that's aged in the distillery. Aged in Bow Street. But this is 18 years old, aged in Middleton. This is the oldest Jameson in their line. The oldest Irish whiskey with the word Jameson on it and an age statement, 18 years old. So Chris Hennessy has said he is on Instagram at Flair_Ireland. Instagram Flair_Ireland. Incredible history of Irish whiskey with Chris. Okay, so we're moving on now. I don't know how many we've gone through. We've gone through Crested, Redbreast 27, Powers 15-year-old, W.D. O'Connell 17-year-old, Jameson 7-year-old pot still, and now we've got Paddy Centenary. Love this brand. Paddy is an incredible Cork brand, and the story of Mr. Paddy Flaherty, the man for whom this whiskey is named, is a story as good as the whiskey itself. Paddy was a salesman for the Cork Distilleries Company. And the Cork Distilleries Company owned the Middleton Distillery, amongst others, a few other distilleries in Cork, the North Mall Distillery, etc. And Paddy was so successful at selling the Cork Distilleries Company whiskey around Ireland, specifically around Cork. And people would love to see him coming because he'd always give samples of his whiskey away, and people would carry him into the pub to get their free whiskey. And what would happen is the bar owners, at the time, the tavern owners, would write to the Cork Distilleries Company and they'd ask for a case of Paddy's whiskey. And everybody knew what Paddy's whiskey was because he sold so much of it. So when Paddy retired in 1913, the Cork Distilleries Company asked if they could license his name, and they'd pay him a fee to license his name for the rest of his life and his afterlife. And he agreed. And so the Cork Distilleries Company Irish Whiskey was changed. They changed their name to Paddy Irish Whiskey. And Paddy is what I would consider a Cork whiskey. Growing up in Ireland, you were either a Paddy house, a Powers house, or a Jameson house probably. We were a Powers house, but I always had a soft spot for Paddy. And if you still walk around Cork today, you'll see stained glass windows in bars with a Paddy name in it, and this old Paddy logo, beautiful block lettering, such a piece of Irish history, going back to our childhood and before, seeing this on mirrors and trays and drip trays in Ireland. Beautiful logo and beautiful branding. This particular bottle I've got here was released in 2013. So Paddy Irish Whiskey Company, or not Paddy Irish Whiskey Company, Cork Distilleries Company, which produced Paddy, eventually became part of Irish Distillers, which was the merging of Powers and Jameson, the Cork Distilleries Company, the Murphy Distillery in Cork. They merged together. Paddy was produced in Middleton in County Cork. And a few years ago, Paddy was spun off from Irish Distillers. It was sold to an American brand. It was sold to Sazerac. And many of you will be familiar with Sazerac, a New Orleans-based, I think it's a privately held company. Family company, has been for 100 plus years. So Paddy is now owned by Sazerac. Shortly before the sale, Paddy Centenary was released. This is the 100-year anniversary of Paddy's naming, the naming of Paddy Irish Whiskey. And it was released in his honour. And so Paddy Irish Whiskey would have been a blended whiskey for the past 40 years, I'd say. And then it would have been a pot still whiskey going way back. So back in the early 1900s, this would have been a single pot still whiskey. And when all of the production consolidated in Middleton, the style of whiskey was mostly changed to blended whiskey, a lighter style of whiskey, blending pot still whiskey and grain whiskey. So corn, lighter, maize from the south of France. But in honour of the original formula, in honour of the original style, and in honour of Paddy, in 2013, Irish Distillers released Paddy Centenary, 100-year anniversary. So it's a 7-year-old single pot still whiskey. Mel, is that an empty glass there by any chance? Yeah, thanks. All right, we're running out of 2 glasses. We're moving on to the rocks glasses here. So this one is not available anymore. It was a once-off limited release. It's available on auction sites. I'm sure Anthony will tell me if he's got a Paddy Centenary in his auction site this month. If he doesn't, he's had it in the past. I know because I've bid on them. I've got a couple of Paddy Centenaries in my locker. It's such a great whiskey. 7 years old, tastes like chocolate, like a melted chocolate bar. Pour a little drop in here. So has anybody ever tried this Paddy Centenary before? Nick Ryan's mentioning that I'm getting happier and happier as I go from glass to glass. Nick, if you looked at the range of whiskies that I'm after going through here now, it's a wonder I'm still functioning. I won't even be able to press end when this thing is over. John Fleming reckons I'm well under the weather. I'm not going to repeat your phrase, John. That's for others to read. Yeah, this is on the nose feels like a very young green, kind of I get that unmalted barley, green grass barley nose to it. But then there's a very different palate comes up to me on this Paddy Centenary. Oh, this one is an absolute joy. For a 7-year-old pot still whiskey. And I'm after following another 7-year-old pot still whiskey, which was the Jameson Bow Street 7-year-old pot still whiskey. It's an absolute joy. It doesn't have the same length as the Jameson. It's short on the palate, but to me, there's a chocolate, toffee, caramel palate to this paddy. And I just love the story of Paddy Irish whiskey and the fact that it's still today produced in Middleton, despite it being owned by an American brand. Yeah, Nick, you're dead right. No chance of me catching the flu after all this whiskey. The only problem now is none of this whiskey has been more than 60%. Although if it had, I don't know that we'd have gone on for what's now almost 2 hours live streaming. And for the 50 of you still hanging in here, fair play to you. The fact that I got 100 on here or 110 at the height is incredible. But yeah, we're on to Paddy. But listen, I'm doing all the talking now. Let me turn it over to you. What questions do you have, those of you who are remaining, about Paddy, about Jameson, about Irish whiskey, about availability? I'd love to hear your thoughts. I'd love to read your questions. So let me play a moment of music while you type your questions in there, and I have a little old sip here. First question. So Casey Ball asks, what's new on the Irish whiskey horizon that you're looking forward to? There have been so many high quality releases in the past few months, but I'm sure there's more in the pipe. Okay, so I've got one word, and John Fleming in Killarney is going to love this. Waterford Distillery. Mel, would you do me a favour? I know I have you running around. Would you mind grabbing me the white box that's left in there with the Waterford whiskey in it? So I might have the only Waterford whiskey in America at the moment. It's not yet been released to the public. It goes on sale in April. Turn myself. Okay, so here we go. Question from Casey Ball. What's the new on the Irish whiskey horizon? What am I looking forward to? The one that I'm looking forward to more than anything else, and John Fleming will appreciate this because he's very close to this, is Waterford Distillery in County Waterford. So I have a few bottles here of what's maybe the only Waterford whiskey in America. So these are sample bottles that I got on a recent visit, and if you haven't seen my video about Waterford Distillery, I think you should go check it out. I reckon that Waterford Distillery is the most exciting new distillery in Ireland. I think it's the most exciting approach to distilling, and I think that it's going to change how producers make Irish whiskey. I think it's going to change how consumers evaluate Irish whiskey. And I think it's going to raise the bar for what Irish single malt whiskey is. When they release and people taste what can happen, or what the result is of a simple young 3 to 5 year old whiskey, and the complexity and the layering and the quality despite its age, but because of the process, because of the quality ingredients, then I think everything's going to change. So I think the end of April, they're having their open day where they're releasing their first bottle called the Pilgrimage. I have here 3 different bottles to show the terroir. And terroir is a phrase that literally means of the land. And it's used a lot in wine, which is the difference between different soil types or different areas based on their soil, their weather, their slope, their gradient, their what's being farmed there before, there's crop rotation. But Waterford Distillery is focusing on single farms. So you've heard of single distilleries. You might have heard of single casks. You've rarely heard of single farms. Single farms meaning where all of the barley for a distillation comes from one farm. It doesn't get lumped in with 500 other farms. It doesn't come from Eastern Europe. It comes from Ireland. It comes from the southeast of Ireland. Waterford, Kilkenny, Tipperary, Wexford, even as far afield as Galway. So incredible what they're doing down there. They've basically taken 3 or 4 massive, broad steps in the whiskey producing process and have turned them into 100 expensive, excruciatingly time-consuming, unnecessary by many standards steps, because they believe it'll produce a far better quality whiskey. So that's the one that I'm most excited about. So they are coming to the US. Stay tuned. I'm going to share lots about them on Stories and Sips, because I think the story of their beliefs and their Mark Ramier, the founders, I think his steadfasted belief about the quality of barley being the most important thing is a story worth telling again and again. So I'll be sharing a lot more about that. Let me see, what else? What other questions have we got here? Anthony Sheehy thinks that my pours have been fairly generous. They have, Anthony. It's honestly, now I'm seeing 6 computers in front of me instead of 1, but we'll struggle on regardless. So a question from Eric about distribution in the US. What accounts for the huge discrepancies in timing of when various regions of the US get access to new releases? Is this because of the US distributors or the distillers? Minnesota seems very many months behind the rest of the country. Great question, Eric. Huge shock to me when I first started experimenting with Irish whiskey and trying to find great Irish whiskies, to learn that the United States and its 50 states is like 50 different countries that each has their own set of liquor laws, and there's a 3-tier system in America by law at a federal level, which means that distillers can't sell to the public. There needs to be distillers, there needs to be distributors, and there needs to be retailers before you can get to the public, and each of those need to be separate. A distillery can't own a distributor can't own a retailer, so there has to be 3 distinct tiers, and this 3-tier system creates headaches, but it also it makes it more complex, and it also makes it harder for each state sets their own rules as to what will be on their shelves and what won't. Added to that, the fact that you've got, is it 16 or 19 controlled states, and a controlled state is basically a state that purchases all the liquor, and they decide who gets what. So, for example, Pennsylvania would be the single biggest purchaser of alcohol in the world. As a state, they acquire the whiskey from the distilleries, and then they sell it on to distributors, and distributors sell it to retailers. Ohio would be the second biggest purchaser of alcohol in the world. These 2 states account for massive amounts of alcohol, but they decide what goes on the shelf. So if you want something on the shelf in Ohio, you have to petition the state of Ohio to stock it, or even to allow the distributor to bring it in the first place, or to make it available to be purchased. So that makes for a very complex system, very convoluted system. And you think the United States is difficult? Try living in Canada with the LCBO and their systems that are extremely convoluted and extremely hard to navigate. And you would even look at them one time and say they in no way are designed to make whiskey or alcohol or spirits available. So that's why it's not the distributor's fault, it's not the distillery's fault, it's purely on a state-by-state basis. So those of you who are familiar with the recent launch of Redbreast 27 will have seen it being available in some states before the launch of Redbreast 27. I had a bottle that I purchased in California 3 weeks before the launch of Redbreast 27, because the states decided when they were going to sell it, the distributors decided when it was going to go on shelves, and nobody talked to anybody, and eventually it ended up on a shelf. So it's very convoluted, it's very complicated, but don't blame the distilleries, don't blame anybody on the production side. It's all down to the individual states. Let me see, what else have we got here? Yeah, Casey mentioning that single farm is really exciting. It really is. He's getting excited for low-age whiskies. Yep, I agree with that. Robert wants to know, what are some of the newer Irish distillers to look for in the States? So Waterford is definitely one of them. Other Irish distillers that are coming of age, so you've got Drumshanbo, which are making a pot still Irish whiskey from The Shed. The Shed is a name of a distillery in County Leitrim, and they're most famous for gunpowder gin. They're ones to pay attention to. They've got oats in their pot still whiskey, so I'd look out for them. Let me see. Nick Ryan wants me to tell the story of Waterford's stills. Okay, so Waterford is a double distillation distillery. They have 2 stills. Those stills were sitting outside Brookladdick Distillery in Scotland, because Mark Rainier ran Brookladdick Distillery. Those two stills were sat outside, and to the best of my knowledge, they come from Inverleven Distillery. They were operated for about 18 or 19 years, but they were unused for many, many years, sitting outside Brookladdick, and Mark Rainier managed to purchase those and use them and transport them to Waterford so that they could have a head start on whiskey production, because Forsyth's, the still maker, the copper still maker in Scotland, has at the time that Waterford Distillery was begun, Macallan was undergoing their massive redevelopment, and Macallan had orders into Forsyth's that pushed delivery times for stills years out. So Mark Rainier took these old stills from Brookladdick that had previously been in Inverleven, I think it's Inverleven, and then brought in Scotland and brought them to Waterford. And please correct me if I'm wrong on any of that. Dee got to visit Waterford a couple of years ago. Really looking forward to their release. Great. MP, great to see you. Great way to spend St. Paddy's evening. Thanks for joining in. Robert asks, there seems to be a connection of Irish Americans and cigars with whiskey or bourbon. Is that a thing in Ireland? It's really not. I do see that here. Go to Instagram and search for cigars or search for whiskey, and you'll see the other one. You'll see whiskey and cigars, cigars and whiskey. Ireland doesn't have a big cigar culture. Maybe that's changing, but certainly it's a big US thing. Dee tried to bribe Waterford with a bottle of Blanton's to get a personal tour. Did it work, Dee? John reckons we're a mess here in the US with alcohol. Yeah, I agree with that. So MP is the third largest importer of Irish whiskey in the US. You're in Michigan? No, Wisconsin, isn't it? You're in Wisconsin as far as I remember, behind Pennsylvania and Ohio. Eric, you're welcome. Yeah, detailed answer and distribution. Nick, you reckon that one of those stills was Mark Rainier's retirement gift from Brookladdick. I had never heard that story before. That's amazing if it's true. That's great. I love that. That's so great. So I'm still on my paddy. So type in for me, those of you that are left, tell me. We're 2 hours and 10 minutes into a live stream. Thanks for hanging out here with me tonight on St. Patrick's Day. We're celebrating. Let me give you all a round of applause for joining me here tonight. Cheers, everyone. Let me know what you're drinking. What's in your glass at the moment? I'd love to know whether you're drinking Green Spot or Proper 12. It doesn't matter to me. I'd love to know what you're drinking. So Casey has a great point here. Great share. He wanted to get my take on this. Casey's dad follows a bourbon and barbecue Facebook group, even though he's a teetotaler, and likes to make the analogy that fine whiskey collections are like the adult version of baseball cards or Pokemon cards. You got to show off which is the rarest that you've got, that sort of thing. Yeah, there's a lot of that out there, no doubt about it. A lot of people are hoarding whiskey. I know quite a few people on Facebook groups for Irish whiskey that constantly post pictures of closed bottles of Irish whiskey, and they don't even drink. So they just collect them to show them off or sell them, and that's okay. I mean, there's a flipper market, there's a secondary market for whiskey. That's fine. It's not for everybody. I have a few special bottles that I'm going to keep for years and years, and maybe somebody will inherit them from me in time. But for the most part, I like to drink whiskey. I think that there's been enough work put into making it. We owe them we owe the producers a little bit of kindness in drinking it. Damien, thanks for joining. Glad you could join in. Happy St. Patrick's Day to you. Hopefully you can join again. Dee, you did manage to bribe the Waterford folks with a bottle of Blanton's. My God, they're a cheap old date. You got in the door for a bottle of Blanton's, huh? You wouldn't get in today for it. Cheers, Brian Riley, Casey Ball, Redbreast 21, Sláinte. Powers 17-year-old Shane with your single casks all day long. Shane Moore, I met through Irish whiskey. Shane Moore and I, Ohio residents, me in Columbus, him in Cleveland. I posted something on an Irish whiskey Facebook group in Ireland about a tasting I was doing in Columbus. Next thing I get a message from this lad called Shane Moore in Cleveland saying, I'm an Irish lad in Cleveland. What's your phone number? 10 minutes later, my phone rings. It's Shane Moore. And we've been best buddies ever since, even doing a little bit of business together. So great, meet great people through Irish whiskey, and hopefully that's been your experience too. Jenny's drinking Sláinte. Great stuff, great stuff there, Jenny. Sláinte. MP with his MVR 18. Middleton Very Rare 18-year-old. Fantastic. Redbreast 15-year-old for Brian Riley. My God, that's brilliant stuff. Redbreast 15 as well for Robert. Robert and Brian, you're both in the same city drinking the same bottle of whiskey. Wouldn't it be great if you got together in the same room and drank that same bottle? William Considine and Encinitas drinking Dingle Batch 3. I doubt now, William, there are very many Dingle Batch 3s in Encinitas. I'd say you're one of the few in Encinitas. I think you need to go down to the beach and take a nice old picture of Dingle Batch 3 on a surfboard for us. Make all the Irish jealous. Eric, you started out with the Barry Crockett legacy. Fair play to you. And you stayed with it. It's all downhill from the Barry Crockett legacy, isn't it? It's hard to go up from there. Third pour of the evening. Fair play to you. I'm still on the paddy here. I think Eric for staying on the Barry Crockett legacy. Maureen, you're ending the night with Redbreast 12 and cleansing your palate with a Guinness. My God, fair play to you. Joe Moore, last sup of the 18-year-old Bow Street cask strength. I don't know of a more complex, flavourful blend than the 18-year-old Bow Street cask strength. I love Middleton Very Rare. I wish Middleton Very Rare was cask strength. It's not. If only it was, we'd have a great old time. But Middleton, or Jameson 18-year-old Bow Street cask strength is the cousin we didn't know we needed, and we certainly don't deserve, but we need it. We absolutely need it. It's a great sup altogether. Wilson Browning, Redbreast 12. Good man for joining us. Wilson married Melinda and I. Fair play to him, and has been a good friend of mine for many years. Wilson, I'm delighted to see you here. Wilson and his wife Morgan and Melinda and I went to Ireland in November, and we had a fantastic time touring around Ireland. You might have seen some of the pictures we took in Ashford Castle and in Galway and in Dingle. We had a fantastic time. And again, great Irish whiskey people opened their doors when they knew that fellow whiskey fans were coming into town, and we had a fantastic trip altogether. Queeveen, you're still hanging in there. Fair play to you. Signing off on the Bill Phil super event, Barry. Thank you. Yeah, great idea. Yeah, sure, we'll give it another shot. All we can do is press play on these videos. You never know what's going to happen, but it's a bit of crack anyway. Delighted you could all join. Jack Jim O'Brien, Killoan Dark Rum experimental series. All right, that deserves a round of applause for that rare whiskey right there. Killoan Dark Rum. So Killoan, for those of you who don't know, and Casey, you asked about what new distilleries to look out for. Killoan, Killowen. They're in Northern Ireland, not far from the Mourne Mountains. They are a small, tiny distillery using open flame distilling. Very rare to see open flame distilling in Ireland, using open flames to heat up their stills. They've released some sourced whiskey, an experimental series, while they're aging their own whiskey. But they are ones to watch. Brendan Carty is the founder, an architect by trade, a passion for Irish whiskey and a passion for history, and has blended his love of history and whiskey together to create the Killoan distillery. Keep an eye out for them, not yet in the US, but hopefully coming soon. Nick Ryan is drinking his own whiskey. Look at the beauty of this. We can have people on this stream who are whiskey makers and sourcers and merchants and bonders and bottlers. Nick is drinking Thomond Gate whiskey. Thomond Gate single pot still whiskey. Check out Thomond Gate online and check out my interview with Nick, which happened not too long ago, where he talked about his adventures in starting a whiskey company the same week that his wife gave birth to their first child. And I hope that in future you'll pay more attention to your children than you will the whiskey, because the whiskey can always wait. But fair play to you, Nick. John is still going on. He's still going. He's on to a Napa Oak 12-year-old. Fantastic. And he's on to the Tully Phoenix next. Oh, fair play to you. Tullamore Dew Phoenix edition is some whiskey altogether. I think that's 55% ABV as far as I know. Andrew Cooper is drinking Teeling Single Cask, Galway Bay Stout finish. Lovely. Polished it off. One of your favourite cask strengths. What else have we got? Andrew Cooper's in Castleknock in Dublin. William Considine says, yeah, it's hard to find the Dingle whiskey for sure. Chris Hennessy says that without a doubt the best stout influence ever, and that cask strength for that Teeling. Great stuff. Suzanne Marcus, you have had the Redbreast 21 and the Jameson Bow Street cask strength before, the Row & Co. Happy enough. You're heading to bed right now. Fair play. Thanks, Suzanne, for joining us. Jessica, Redbreast 21 remains your favourite. I think, from my understanding, Jessica, you're in Ireland right now visiting from the US, as far as I know. Hope you're enjoying yourself. Dee and Jeff, thanks for joining. You guys are out. Hope to meet you in Indianapolis soon. Glad that you're able to join us. Nick is bottle feeding Hector now. Fair play to you. I hope you're bottle feeding milk now and not some of that single pot still whiskey. You can't be getting these two worlds colliding too much. All right, guys, we have a round of applause coming. A very important round of applause. And here's why. Shane Moore has opened up a Dream Cask 20-year-old. Here we go. A 50 milliliter sample he had saved for today. Big applause. All right, let's do a second applause because that deserves a second applause. Now, Shane, where were you when Billy Lighton was here talking about whiskies? You could have honoured the man by opening up the Dream Cask in his honour. But not to worry. He knows you're thinking of him, I'm sure. Stacey, thanks for the great evening too. Yes, thank you. And for the great suggestions. Stacey has a fantastic Irish wolfhound, by the way. And I've threatened with calling this wolfhound into our next Irish whiskey tasting in Ohio, because I think it would make a lovely addition to sit at my feet while I talk about Irish whiskey. So Stacey, that might happen. And the next Irish wolfhound is going to be named Middleton, because our current Irish wolfhound is called Magner. So the next one's going to be called Middleton. Great stuff. So Jessica, you just got back from Ireland. Great stuff. Joe, your glass of Jameson 18-year-old cask strength is empty. Ihawa, a gut. Gurv Mahagut Galair, agus Sláinte. Look forward to seeing you again soon. This is, guys, what a group. What an amazing group we're having here. I'm loving this tasting. So I think I'm down to my last whiskey. I have a few left over here. Who's got more questions about Irish whiskey? What have we got? Let me see. Well, I've got the Napo Castle 12-year-old. This is the French wine cask finish. The Chateau Pichon Baron, French oak. 12-year-old, 46%. This was shared by Omar. That's damn good. Great sharing community in the Irish whiskey world. Omar sent me a big box of samples. I did him a few favours and he did me one or two as well. This is my next sub after I finish my paddy. Okay, so good news here on the dog front. Melinda, I hope you're listening. The next tasting, we're going to have Irish Wolfhound and an Irish Red Setter. So Brian's going to bring his Irish Setter, and we're going to have two dogs as props. I'll pay you both in whiskey. How's that? I have some good stock. I'll raid my cellars for some good stuff for you guys. Brian and Stacey. Stacey Stearns and Brian Riley connect with each other online. You're both Irish whiskey fans. You're both in Columbus, Ohio, and you both have Irish dogs. If you're not connecting, there's something wrong. Robert, Scott, thanks again for another wonderful evening. Go back to your Middleton Very Rare 2018 if I have another one left. Yes, please do. I'm going to open up this final whiskey here. This is, honest to God now, I'm having a great old time with a lot of you here. This is happening weekly. Melinda's smiling over there, laughing at my devolution into inebriation as I pour 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, whiskey number 7. We're still standing or sitting. And what?
It's your day.
It's my day. It's my day. Jessica says there really is a great community sharing with other aficionados. There's absolutely a fantastic community here. Honest to God, I've never felt such community. So I've been out of Ireland now for, 2007. 13 years I've been out of Ireland, and only by getting back into Irish whiskey did I start to rebuild that connectivity with Ireland. There's this kind of tissue that connects me with Ireland that is whiskey, and what a community I've met. I mean, the folks that have joined here tonight, an absolute privilege that I get to spend time with them. Irish people who know nothing but goodness and kindness and generosity. And when I meet Americans who tell me about the great time they had in Ireland and the great people they've met, I couldn't even begin to argue with them because I know who they've met. I know the people that they've hung out with and that have bought them a drink or told them a secret place to go or given them some advice or taken care of them when they needed help. All those people are on this stream here tonight, and that's an incredible privilege for me that I get to hang out with people like this. So hopefully my American friends who are here tonight get to join with my Irish friends and meet up virtually and eventually in person, because great old people drinking great old whiskey is a formula that deserves repeating again and again and again. So what else have we got here now? Paul's drinking a Kilbeggan single batch, a small batch rye. Fantastic. Sitting in a hotel room in Portland, Oregon. I love Portland, Oregon. Shame all the bars are closed in Portland, Oregon. Yeah. What was the name of the bar we went to? The whiskey bar. Oh. I'm 7 whiskeys in. There's no way I can remember it. Shame it's closed. But Paul, thanks for joining us. Andrew, cheers for tonight. Great Paddy's night with this. Yeah, great altogether. Shane Moore tells us that we should brace ourselves. I don't know what he's on about now. Shane's been drinking whiskey since about 9 o'clock this morning. So he's crawling along the floor now, I'd say, on one leg and one arm. Shane, tell us what's up next. So I'm on now to the Nap Oak 12-year-old. So this is finished in French Chateau Pichon Baron French oak. So former wine casks. And there's a lovely sweetness on the nose of this. Dark cherry, dark grape, stone fruit nose to it. Clearly a single malt. There's a single malt citrusy to it. Wow, very spicy on the mouth. Very spicy. For 46%. Definitely getting the tannins of the wine, the mouthfeel for a single malt. A little bit creamier. Good length to it. Beautiful oak finish to this too. Adding some air to the mouth gives me some oak and that. Very, very nice. I love the Nap Oak series of whiskies from 12 all the way up to 21. One of the finest 21, hard to fault a 21-year-old whiskey. Nap Oak 21-year-old Tim McKee from Whiskey Wednesdays in New York devoured a good portion of a bottle in his apartment and thought it was one of the most spectacular single malts we've ever had. The 3 desert island whiskies, I talked earlier about 1 desert island whiskey, but if I was to have 3, it would be the 3 21-year-olds, the 3 big hitters. Redbreast 21, Bushmills 21, and Nap Oak 21. Bushmills 21, big favourite of Melinda's, who loves it. And the other 21-year-olds, just absolutely incredible. So you go from a pot still to 2 single malts. Absolutely beautiful. John Maritko, you've opened this Nap Oak yourself tonight. You're surprised you waited so long. Me too. It's a far superior to the original 12-year-old, which in itself is very good. Wow. Andrew, good night. Thanks for joining us. Glad you were able to join us. JJ, quickly, if I was to open 1 Redbreast cask strength, okay, here's my choices. Redbreast cask strength, Red Spot, or Method and Madness Wild Cherrywood, which one would it be? If I was to open 1, Redbreast cask strength, Red Spot, or Method and Madness Wild Cherrywood, Red Spot. Red Spot for me, JJ, all day long. Billy Bryan's is drinking a Redbreast 12-year-old. Beautiful whiskey. Absolutely beautiful. Jessica's drinking a Redbreast. Anthony Sheehy, you mentioned that the new wine casks have added so much variation to Irish whiskey recently that Nap Oak is a cracker. I absolutely agree with you. There is a colour profile almost, if I could even describe it like that, that's added to this whiskey. There's a purple, red pinkness that is added to the flavour, and could taste be a colour? That's lovely. Beautiful. MP sneaking in a quick Tully 15 before you shut it down for the night. Tully 15 is a lovely drop. I had that for the first time about a year and a half ago. I've only ever had about a half bottle of that in my possession, but I have to go back to it. Stacey Stearns asks, she says she's out of Green Spot. All right, we need to send an ambulance, but an applause for being assuming all of Green Spot out from Bushmills 16-year-old. That's quite the leap from single pot still to single malt. Bushmills 16 is a great drop of whiskey. I mean, one of the staples. I mean, Bushmills have been making this for many, 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 many years. I would love to see a lot more coming out of Bushmills. They're sitting on aged whiskey that they're doing nothing with, and I want to see more of it coming out. So hopefully, more of this whiskey will be released soon. Casey Ball says the sound analogy, that's the way music producers speak. Yeah, let me get some more pinks and purples in the mix. Yeah, I'm no music producer and I'm barely a whiskey taster here. But I'm trying to go with the first thing that sprung to my mind. A guy who tastes, an experienced whiskey taster recently said to me, the first thing that you get in your mind when you smell or you taste whiskey, go with it. If that's a book, if it's an engine, if it's whatever it is, to me that was just colours, so I just went with it. The colour analogy, for some reason that stood out to me. There is a pink purpleness to this Chateau Pichon Baron French Oak Napa Castle, which I believe was only available in travel retail. And travel retail is huge for distilleries who sell through airports, which is a huge market for them. So this is my final whiskey of the night before I collapse in a heap. So anybody got any more questions on the whiskies we've tried tonight? Let me put up some of them up here. Okay, Jameson Crested. Not a bad selection, I think you'll agree. I can't believe we've gone through this many. Melinda's wondering how we're still sitting here communicating. Alright, there's 6 of them. Where's the 7th one? What else did we go through? Probably finish something. Oh no. There we go. What a shot. 7 whiskies. We did well there. I mean, it's not that I'm done yet, but just want to show you what we cracked our way through. But this has been brilliant. Absolutely fantastic to chat and to share a glass when we're all in isolation. But I think we'll do this again and again and again, if you'll allow me. And if you'll turn up, we'll absolutely do it. Brian's wondering, do we know when Ohio may see another 27 bottles of Redbreast 27? Brian, even Ohio doesn't know when it'll see another 27 bottles of Redbreast 27. We're getting another batch. That is the word. So I spoke to the distributor last week, and they told me that there is another batch coming. But they can't tell when. There's another wave of it. And allocation is just a crazy thing. Who gets allocated what? There seems to be no algorithmic formula to it whatsoever. I can't work it out. So we're at the mercy of the day, the minute, the hour, what turns up where. So when I was traveling in California and I saw a bottle on the shelf, even though it was $200 more, I had to pick it up because I didn't know when I was going to get hold of a bottle. So it's a bit of a crapshoot, unfortunately. MP wants to know, should he save his Redbreast 27 for a special event or just save it for the next Wednesday? Is today Wednesday? I think today's Tuesday. Tuesday. MP, how many have you had?
Wednesday there.
Oh, it's Wednesday. Oh, no, is it Wednesday there? No. No. MP's up in Wisconsin. Jessica said that Paddy is the only one you haven't tried. Yeah, and it's an unusual Paddy too, isn't it? Paddy Centenary. I would love to see more coming out of Paddy. What an underutilized historic brand, and I wish Sazerac would put more emphasis on it and not just use it as their pouring paddies, as they've called it in America. William Considine says, no driving after that. No, you're dead right. There'll be no driving. I wouldn't put a drop to my lips if I was driving, which is why we have Ubers and Lyfts, thankfully, here. Jessica says this should be weekly. We'll do our best. I'd love to. Casey says he's got to ask, any thoughts on Green Spot single cask? That's like the Flipper's Jewel as far as I know. So yeah, so Green Spot, there is 1 barrel of single cask released every year. and that normally goes to Mitchell and Sons. So Mitchell and Sons is the creator of the Spot range of whiskies, Green Spot being the most common and the most familiar to many. And every year, Irish Distillers in Middleton releases one single cask to Mitchell and Sons. Last year, Mitchell and Sons granted that cask to the Palace Bar in Dublin to release as a Palace Bar Green Spot. So these single casks are highly sought after. Why? Because there's probably about 200, 300 bottles in a cask. They're typically cask strength, and they do typically command a lot of money at auction, especially the rarer ones, the older ones, the 10-year-old, the 12-year-old Green Spots historically. The more recent ones are not as lucrative on the flippers market. I'd say you open them, you buy them, you drink them. They're great value if you can get hold of them at retail, and if you do, enjoy it, drink it. They're worth finding. Jessica had to taste the 27-year-old in Killarney. I bet you were in the Celtic Whisky Bar and Larder in Killarney, because I can't imagine there's many more places in Killarney stocking Redbreast 27. If that's where you were, I'm sure you had a great drop. John would love to see more on the Paddy. Totally. There's so much that Paddy could do with their history and the storytelling, and not just be slapping leprechauns and shamrocks on the brand to appeal to Americans. I think Americans are smarter than that and can appreciate the honest story, not line drawings of a man with a paddy cap talking to cows in the fields of Ireland. So now we are down to my last whiskey, which I'm sipping here, which is the Napo Castle 12-year-old. Really is a complex, great value whiskey. And I love these wine finishes. When I first tried the Green Spot wine finishes, the two, Chateau Montelena and Chateau... what's the second one? Chateau Montelena and... I can't remember the second one. It's not coming to me. I didn't like them originally, so they grew on me. I guess like anything, you have to try it a few times in different times of the day or night, in different moods and states of mind, and you'll start to get different feelings about it. But the wine finishes have really started to grow on me, and I'm not a wine drinker at all. But yeah, these are the sweetness that comes from these, and the tannic contribution to me is a lovely combination with the whiskey. Anthony Sheehy said that the Green Spot Whisky Exchange 26-year-old is seriously undervalued and unbelievable whiskey for the money. Anthony, I had a bottle of it last year. I absolutely agree with you 100%. It's a 26-year-old whiskey that, to my knowledge, is still for sale publicly on the Whisky Exchange. I opened a bottle. I donated the bottle to a charity tasting in the Middleton Distillery last year, which we'll try and do again this year, by the way, in 2020, if travel schedules allow and coronavirus allows. We'll try and negotiate a tasting after hours in the Middleton Distillery. We did it for the first time in the history of the distillery last year. We had a tremendous event, and one of the whiskies we tried was this 26-year-old Green Spot. It was the first whiskey of the night, and it blew everybody away. And it is still for sale, and I think it's about £400 or £500 on the Whisky Exchange website. But it's a 26-year-old Green Spot. We won't see many more of these, I don't think. And I'm very tempted to get another bottle of this. It's an absolutely incredible whiskey. But Anthony, you're right, it's undervalued. It didn't sell out instantly. It was released the same day as a 12-year-old. And the 12-year-old sold out in about an hour. But the 26-year-old, still there, as far as I know, in the Whisky Exchange. Great whiskey. So Shane Moore asks, my top 3 all-time whiskies, regardless of age or price. Boy, top 3 whiskies. Number 1, Redbreast 32-year-old Dream Cask. Without a doubt. Without a doubt. Chocolate, toffee. You need a knife and fork to finish it. It's as thick and treacle-like. It is a piece of a work of art, a piece of just incredible. The fact that so many things came together, wood, spirit, time, bottling, everything worked. It's just perfect. Number 1. Number 2. God, I'll be killed if I stick with Redbreast for all of these, but number 2. 2 weeks in my hand, and it's the number 2 whiskey of all time. Redbreast, 27-year-old. What do you think, Mel?
Good.
Number 3, Bushmills 21. High five from Melinda. Dream Cask, 32-year-old Redbreast, number 1. Redbreast, 27-year-old, number 2. Bushmills, 21-year-old, number 3.
It's my favorite. Plus Connemara.
Bushmills 21 is your favourite?
Yeah, and Connemara.
And Connemara. Now, these are very old whiskies that I've mentioned, but I happen to love a wood contribution in whiskey, and I love a sherry contribution in whiskey. Bushmills 21 has a sherry contribution. Dream Cask, Redbreast 32 is a massive sherry contribution. Redbreast 27 to a degree, yes, a third of it, is a sherry contribution. So those 3 would be my favourite, 3 favourite whiskies of all time. Leavell Barton is the green spot that I couldn't remember after 7 whiskies. Thanks, Brian Riley, for mentioning that to me. John Ritko has poured another of the French oak cask. Fantastic. Toast to you. Little applause going out to you there, John. Thank you, Paul. Shout out Leavell Barton. Jack Jim O'Brien asks, what's my favourite mash bill? So for those of you who don't know what a mash bill is, it's just like a recipe. It's the original ingredients that go into creating the whiskey. So it might be 30% malted barley, 70% unmalted barley. Great question. I don't know that I have that much ability to discern between mash bills, Jack. To be honest, I'm very amateur and new in this journey of whiskey appreciation. And I'm relying on people like you and others who've got experience to kind of show me the way. So I don't know that I've got a favourite, but I'm always curious to know what the mash bills are. And sadly, we don't know the mash bills of all the whiskies. Like, it's tough to know. Redbreast are tough. It's tough to get out of them. If Billy Lighton was here, we might put him on the spot now again and ask him what the mash bill is of Redbreast, but they don't often share the exact quantities, whether it's 45, 55 or what. So I'll have to come back to that one, but it's a good question. James Kearns asks, what's the opinion on distilleries using other people's whiskey to create a label? I know some are historic, but what about the new ones? It's a great question. I'm torn. I'm all about distilleries needing to fund operations, and I'm also conscious that to keep the lights on, they need to make money. Some of them distill gin and vodka to do that. Others bring in sourced whiskey from other distilleries. I don't think that's a bad thing. What's a bad thing to me is if they claim it as their own, or if they are selling it as distillery-only exclusive whiskey from a barrel in your gift shop, but you're not disclosing that you bought it from a distillery 400 miles away. That to me is a little bit disingenuous, and so I struggle with that, mostly because I think that distilleries are missing a trick. I think they're missing a trick by not trading on the brand success of an existing distillery. So if I'm a distillery in, let's say, County Clare, I start a distillery in the morning and I buy my stock, source my stock from Great Northern Distillery in County Louth, which is started by John Teeling, an Irish whiskey legend. Isn't it worth more to the consumer that it came from there, a legend in the whiskey world that pretty much created a non-monopoly in the whiskey world by going head-to-head with Irish distillers in the 1990s and the late 1980s? Isn't it better for the end user that they've got provenance, origin, source to make up their mind, but also knowing it comes from a great place? So I wish more distilleries would do more be more transparent. It costs them nothing. And I think there's a lot of, I worry about ego at play trying to protect their own name. Brian Riley has to drop. Thanks, Brian, for joining. Really appreciate you joining. Let me see, what else have we got? Casey Ball asks, where does the 20-year-old Dream Cask land? So if my top 3 are Redbreast 32, Redbreast 27, and Bushmills 21, if I had a fourth one, it would be the Dream Cask 20. 100%. So for Anthony, his favourite is Jameson 15 pure pot still. Are you drinking it right now, Anthony? That's an incredible drop. So a little story to tell you there about Jameson 15-year-old pure pot still. I don't know if any of you have ever tried it. Shane Moore was kind enough to crack a bottle open in my house a couple of months ago. He brought it down and opened up this bottle. Jameson 15-year-old came out in 1999, around the time of the millennium, to celebrate the millennium. And at the time, I believe the bottle retailed for about £40. It was a 15-year-old whiskey, pure pot still. is what they called it at the time. Today we call it single pot still. Ger Garland, the brand ambassador for Irish distillers, told me that at the time there was so little demand for Irish whiskey of that age and of that price point that if you bought 2 bottles, they'd give you a third for free. That was the demand. That was how tough it was to sell a bottle of this 15-year-old pot still. Today, you'd be lucky to get it for €600, which is about $700. And it is the most incredible whiskey. 15 years old, and I think it's the last time, to my knowledge, and I stand corrected on this if there's somebody with better information, it's the last time that Jameson released a pot still whiskey. Every Jameson that leaves the distillery is a blend today. So that was the last one that was a pot still style of whiskey, malted and unmalted barley. So if you're drinking that, Anthony, fair play to you. Get it into you. MP says that high on his list of most favourite whiskies of all time is the Redbreast all sherry Palace Bar that I gave him a sample of in Columbus last week. Well, I gave him 2 samples, and there's a reason why I did. He drove 10 hours to my whiskey tasting in Columbus. MP, you're a legend. I can't believe you did that, and I'm glad you didn't drive home after it. I'm glad you had a bit of a sleep before it. But tremendous dedication to Irish whiskey there. Let me see. Jessica asks if she should invest $1,200 in the Redbreast 32-year-old. Jessica, if you have $1,200 that you're comfortable with spending on something to drink it, buy it, enjoy it. It is the most incredible whiskey I've ever had in my life. I finished off a bottle over Christmas. It was a bottle I opened for my anniversary with my wife, Melinda. We went to a park last year near our house. We brought this bottle with us and we sat for 2 hours, 3 hours, 4 hours, however length of time it was. We cracked open this bottle of 32-year-old Redbreast and we laughed and drank it and had a great old day and just enjoyed ourselves, and that's what whiskey's for. Absolute incredible time. William, thank you for joining. Great times. I'm glad you joined us. Off to feed the kiddos. Fair play to you. Let me see. What else have we got? Thanks for that answer, Barry from James. Yes, you're right. The new brand can't match up with their 3-year-old. It's all about provenance. It is. Good night all. Robert Scott, thank you for joining. Let me see. Jack asked me what my thoughts are on poitín. I have very few thoughts on poitín because I haven't expanded my palate far enough to enjoy it, although I have enjoyed it at 1661, bar 1661 in Dublin, with Dave Mulligan, who was kind enough to share with me, Dave Mulligan, kind enough to share with me some of his own Bon poitín, which was very good indeed. David, still hanging in there. Thanks so much for the evening. You're off to get the kids ready for remote learning. Fantastic. Glad you're here for so long. We had a great old turnout. What else have we got? MP is a legend. James also says that 15-year-old pot still is his favourite. Matt Kelly joining us, absolutely, from the Carolinas. Great to have you. Glad you're in. You had the family over. I hope you've cracked open something nice. You were drinking some lovely dingle there I saw on Instagram earlier today. Glad that you could join us. Jessica asks, which anniversary was it that we opened up our Redbreast 32? Which was it? Our first anniversary. The first of many. It was our first anniversary. A fitting bottle. And it was lovely because we sat under a tree and I shot a little video of us opening this bottle and I put it up on Facebook and just toasted the anniversary. And it was very special because 10 minutes later, Billy Lighton, the blender from Middleton, who put it together, commented on the post saying he's delighted that the Redbreast has been put to such good use and he felt like he was there with us. And it was a lovely little moment. So, yeah, it was great. Anthony, thanks for joining. Appreciate you being here. You're a legend. Good luck with the auction. You've got some big bottles there. If anybody's in the market for a 45-year-old peated single malt from Middleton, Anthony will take your €40,000 willingly from you. So please log on to irishwhiskeyauctions.ie. Matt Kelly is about to share in the Redbreast 27. Matt, we opened this earlier. Look how much is left. Nothing. Well, a third of the bottle is left. Incredible drop altogether. Delighted that you're joining. Jessica, you just had your 12th anniversary. Congratulations. That deserves a special bottle as well. So a round of applause for Matt for joining us. Yay. And also a round of applause for Jessica. Congratulations on your 12th anniversary. 7 whiskies in. We're doing well here. Matt, you missed out on the first 6 whiskies. We're down to the Napo 12-year-old Chateau Pichon Baron. But we've gone through quite a few. But you can catch the replay of this. 2 hours and 46 minutes of it. We've been as high as 110 people on this stream, which has been fantastic. So thank you all for hanging in there. So I'm going to spend another maybe 1 or 2 minutes on this, and then I'm going to log off as well. It's been a long, enjoyable stream with you all, and I'm hoping to be able to come back with you all again soon. Changing my little overlay here, changing size. There we go. Alright, so listen, it's been a fantastic few hours hanging out with incredible friends, new and old. I'm delighted that you were able to join us. I'm absolutely thrilled to be in your presence and to share a drink with you. We're in tough times, we're in different times, we don't know what's ahead. I want you all to stay safe, I want you all to stay healthy, and if you need anybody to share a drink with, if you want to end isolation, if you want somebody to reach out to, give me a shout. You know where I am on Facebook, on Twitter, on Instagram. Irish Whiskey Barry, Stories and Sips, find me. And I'll happily chat with anybody anytime. I think we should do this once a week. I think it's worth it. Maybe I'll start even a bit earlier so we get more of the Irish involved. I'll take a day off and just dedicate it to having a few drinks of whiskey, meeting friends. This is absolutely a joy to do, and hopefully I get to see you all on the next stream that we do. So I'll have a little think about it and see. I'll see which one we do, or see what day we choose and how often we can do it, but weekly would be fantastic. And I'm looking forward to reading back through all the comments now once I have a bit of dinner after 3 hours of chatting and 7 different whiskies. So thank you all for joining. I'm going to finish up. Sláinte, stay safe, hug your family, love you all.